Local Authority Fund of the Local Government Act 1976, Act 171, to build the Jeram WTE incinerator, burning capacity 3,500 tons for 2 WTE incinerator in the venue, and also WTE incinerator in Tanjung 12 with a burning capacity of 2,500 tons in Selangor. And on June 22nd, 2022, 7 municipal councils in Selangor, namely Shah Alam, Subang Jaya, Klang, Petaling Jaya, Sepang, Kuala Langat, and Hulu Selangor, have obtained the permission to be the stakeholders in the Sukuk. It is estimated that 90 megawatts of the electricity generated by these 3 WTE incinerators will be provided to the Ministry of Housing and Local Governments and the Energy Commission. The power system study, PSS, of the 3 WTE incinerators have been approved by Tenaga Nasional Berhad, and a power purchase agreement with TNB and the relevant financial institutions were finalized. On 26 November 2022, during the presentation of the State 2023 budget, the Chief Minister of Selangor announced that the Selangor State Government had allocated funds of 4.5 billion Malaysian ringgit to develop the Selangor Green Energy Eco Park project in Rawang, managed by KDEB Waste Management, that covers an area of 245 acres, which our group will be going on a site tour to this site to meet with the community impacted by this proposal and to have a community dialogue tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. So this project will have 4 phases of implementations. The first phase will be municipal waste incineration, 2,400 tons of burning capacity. But the second phase will be a scheduled waste incinerator, still waste to energy, with burning capacity of 100 tons of scheduled waste. And the third phase will consist of another incinerator that have 1,000 tons of burning capacity. So in total, there are 6 municipal councils involved as stakeholders, mainly Municipal Council of Petaling Jaya, Shah Alam, Subang Jaya, Ampang Jaya, Hulu Selangor, and Selayang. So next. Apart from the municipal solid waste, the first scheduled waste to energy plant in Malaysia is located in the Integrated Waste Management Center. This is part of the 240 acres Sanviro Eco Park, operates by Quality Alam and Sanviro Groups. The last one, I think. Next. Okay, way forward. So we are at this juncture, at this point in time, what is the way forward? Number 1, we have to de-link waste from energy. Energy renewable plants, we have to speak to the government and also pursue the government to look for other sources, more sustainable sources for renewable energy, but not municipal waste, especially not through incineration. WTE incineration release a lot of pollutants to the environment, in the air and underground, and have proven a lot of problems in the track record. And most importantly, Malaysia as a signatory to Paris Agreement, Stockholm Convention, and also as a member of the United Nations, have to consider the latest United Nations Assembly resolutions 171 and 17166. YB William Leon from Selayang have just arrived. Thank you for your support, YB William. Yes. So Malaysia has to catch up on its renewable energy targets. 3 significant options like hydropower, solar energy, biodiesel or bioethanol for renewable energy options to align with the Malaysia's commitment to the Kyoto Protocol, which Malaysia has been a signatory since 2002. Okay. Shall I stop here? Maybe I wait for the question in the Q&A. With that, I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Alright, those were two important last two statements. We have to delete waste from energy, and waste energy is not renewable energy. Thank you for that very comprehensive presentation of the waste to energy situation in Malaysia. The next speaker is from the Philippines. She's from Eco Waste Coalition. Nina Sarmiento is a development communication practitioner. She's been working in the agriculture and environment sector since 2019. Currently, she's working on debunking false solutions, particularly the waste to energy and corporate greenwashing as a campaigner of the Plastic Free Pilipinas project of Eco Waste Coalition. Nina, are you ready?
Yes po, sure. Can you see my presentation on the screen?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Hello everyone, especially those who are listening and watching us virtually. Again,
Nina, we can't hear you. Can someone text her that she can't? So maybe we can entertain to one question. For
recording in progress. Environmental and Natural Resources, or the DKNR, said that we have 279 operational landfills. And with a total capacity of 66.87 metric tons, million cubic meters, I mean, and they plan to establish more landfills since it is the only one allowed in our country. So, but since the government failed to address the growing generation of waste and the lack of infrastructure to properly dispose all this waste, they are seeing waste to energy as a solution. So because of these drivers, there are laws in the Philippines that prohibit incineration, but there is also one that advocates for it. So there are some policies that do not really complement with each other. Philippines has a good law in terms of prohibiting incinerators, but still there's have a loophole on it. So first we have the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2001, or the RE 9001, wherein it celebrated its 23rd anniversary yesterday. So this law prohibits incineration and briefly mentioned WTE as one of the waste minimization techniques, wherein the National Solid Waste Management Committee should look into it as part of their framework. So RE 9003 complements the Philippine Clean Air Act, which states that incineration is banned in the Philippines. If we are going to encompass WTE by its general term as resource recovery, it will support the waste management hierarchy established by RA 9003, which we still should prioritize the most preferred option. And then recovery is on the least preferred option in terms of waste minimization, such as avoidance, reduction, reuse, and recycling. So according to the ESWM, or the RA 9003, we really need to prefer the most preferred option, which talks about the avoidance, the reuse, the reduction, and recycling. So meanwhile, on the judgment of the Supreme Court in Metropolitan Manila Development Authority as the petitioner versus the JANCOM Environmental Corporation, International Development Project as the respondents, Supreme Court said that incineration is not absolutely banned, and only those incineration procedures that emit poisonous and toxic fumes are prohibited. This decision implies that incineration-based WTEs are legally allowed to operate. But the issue here in the Philippines is, up to this day, the standards that will determine if the incinerators are emitting poisonous and toxic fumes are still absent and undeveloped. So, on the other hand, the Philippines has its first legislative act that explicitly advocates WTE for the adoption of the WTE, and it is the Renewable Energy Act, or the RA 9153. So, in this law, there is no explicit declaration of waste as a renewable energy source, and it only allows biodegradable waste conversion into useful energy. So, the WTE is being defined under this law, wherein waste feedstock appears to be limited only to the biodegradable type. Namely, this is, it doesn't include recyclable, residual, or special waste. So, the RA Act has no declaration that WTE is RE technology or system regardless of the type of the waste feedstock used. So, the state of the WTE in the country is best understood under the legal frameworks and policies that affect it. So, this timeline that we are seeing in front of you is the timeline of the Philippine policies related to WTE from the 3 government branches. So, as you can see in the timeline, after the RE Act is being implemented, we are dealing with different orders and policies coming from legislative, judicial, and even executive levels that are explicitly promotes and advocates WTE. So, as Brex mentioned earlier during his presentation, the Philippine Congress urgently wants to amend the Clean Air Act. So, they want to amend the Clean Air Act. So, the current 19th Congress right now has 6 pending bills that talks about WTE, and 2 of them are in the Senate level already. At this point, it is important to highlight that there is no current law embodying a WTE framework, regulatory framework, rather in the Philippines. And that is something that we are keenly monitoring, because any movement from the Congress allowing WTE here will create a domino reaction from the local government and WTE proponents. So, which we are trying to stop or to influence that with researchers and positions that state how scary WTE is, not only in the environment, but also to the health of the people. So, the fight on WTE makes it challenging here in the Philippines because majority of the Philippine leaders sitting in the Congress are pro-WTE. These people are the decision makers of our country, and they have a very powerful influence to push this destructive facility. So another challenge is the local government sees WTE as an instant solution to the waste problem. Other of them, they are not really like labeling the WTE as an incinerator. They are more on using a soft word to promote it to the community. So the community will have no idea that it's burning of waste already. So they have this narrative that to eliminate our in the country, why not use it to produce the energy, which is also one of the major topics now in the Philippines, since we are facing a depleting resources of energy by 2027. So, without already looking on the WTE, here in the Philippines, we are very technology driven. That's why WTE is more appealing than a behavioral approach solution, which is the zero waste. So the lack of pragmatic support on zero waste from the government is also one of the challenges. But dealing with the community, we have seen different efforts and initiatives at the same time promoting zero waste. And we are starting with the community on the ground, and then at the same time with the small and medium enterprises locally here in the Philippines. So even though there's no law supporting the WTE, some LGUs are showing support already for this technology. This is what currently happening on the ground today. Lately, one of our senators, which is Senator Tulfo, he is the chairperson of the Committee on Energy, promised the support to Singapore and other investors who want to invest in WTE, even though there's already a research that said that the WTE in the Senate is already a failure. So, different LGUs also have efforts to push through. Like in Pangasinan, they launched their first green and sustainable waste to energy facility in Pangasinan. Their program to that, and they're promoting or introducing a modular incinerator already somewhere there in their province. And then at the same time, the Baguio City already also announced that they will be having a WTE facility in one of their list area. And then at the same time, this is a very recent. The governor of the province of the Cebu now having this greenwashing false solution that turning plastic waste into cash to encourage the community, the LGU, to give them the trash, and then they were going to co-process it to one of the cement kiln company there. So, with this regarding to what's happening on the ground, this is how the modular incinerator in Pangasinan. So we are currently looking for it in Pangasinan to see it personally. Some of the LGU already received it as a gift. So currently, we are still investigating and trying to come up with a comprehensive report that will expose the reality behind this technology that's happening in Pangasinan. Pangasinan is one of the hotspots in WTE in the Philippines. But there are already different sites there already that we need to look at it very keenly, because here in the Philippines, still there's no law saying WT is allowed or such like that. So, meanwhile, WT is really a red alert to the Philippines since many behind the doors activities are ongoing. So, for example, this one in Barangay Guba, Cebu City, one of our community under our project, under our organization. So it is reported that there's already construction going on without the community knowing. So while our team is the community residents, they were informed that the project is about housing project and or something that is not related to waste to energy. The community there is not aware that a joint venture agreement between the city and then the private proponent already signed the JVA or the joint venture agreement, particularly on this side for the waste to energy. But there's still no disclosure that the Gubat City will be the place to construct the facility, but in reality, they're ongoing now, right now. So this facility wants to be like constructed there because it's near in the landfill. But the scary part of it is near the watershed of the province of the Cebu. And then so the impact of this project to the community and to the environment is more than what we can imagine if it will happen. So given those challenges, what we are doing on the ground in our organization in EcoWaste, we really aim for a systematic approach and change to be seen in that perspective. So that's why we are constantly and actively participating in community hearings on plastic issues and specifically on WTE bills and monitoring the movement of the Congress. So currently, there's still no resumed committee hearing, particularly on the Senate bill on the WTE bill. That's why we always monitor the movement of Senator Tulfo since he is the committee on the energy, the chairperson. So So aside from that, we really want to make the community aware and have the capacity to participate and somehow impart their voices to the decision makers. We are capacitating the community on WTE firefighting and legal works by conducting paralegal training. Since we have this group of lawyers that we are working with, they are conducting paralegal training so that this community are very prepared in terms of intimidation from the leaders, from the community leaders, or even for the private sectors. So also we are trying to influence the educational institutions, the youth, and then other stakeholders in promoting zero waste as the real solution by having them participate in different trainings and activities. So right now, one of the achievements is the bag participative also at the same time with the zero waste initiative. I believe that tomorrow there will be a committee hearing on their level to establish and institutionalize the zero waste in their community, in their city. So lastly, we really want to institutionalize the reuse economy in the Philippines. We really want to go back to the culture and traditional way of how we are doing things before without this technology being introduced to us. And even though it's very challenging because there's no support, major support from the government to push through it, but there's many local and international organizations pushing for zero waste economy here in the Philippines that we are really helping hand in hand to make it happen in the future. So this is our reminder to all of us that we cannot bury or burn our way out to waste. So zero waste is the real solution. And with that, that's the situation of the Philippines in terms of the WTE. And I'll be entertaining questions later during the open forum. So thank you for your time listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Nina. Will you guys stay? Please stay for the Q&A. All right.
That's true.
And yeah, that's the 4 strategies that are applied in the Philippines: movement building, paralegal, partnership with other stakeholders, and promoting zero waste. And the next speaker is Abdul Ghaffar. They are a 3-person team here in Wagi, and thank you for flying to Malaysia just to speak and share your experience on waste to energy campaigning and sharing your situation in Malaysia. Abdul Ghaffar is the campaign manager for pollution and urban justice at WALHI, the Indonesian Forum for Environment, or Friends of the Earth Indonesia. From 2020 to 2021, he was co-coordinator of the Alliance for Zero Waste Indonesia and Climate Justice Program Officer at the WALHI National Office from 2019 to 2021. Take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Selamat siang. Thank you, Mayang, for giving me as representative of WALHI, Friends of the Earth Indonesia, sisterhood organization of Sahabat Alam Malaysia, SAM. And the context of waste to energy incineration in the developing countries such as Indonesia, Philippines, and of course Malaysia, I think it's quite similar. The promotional of waste to energy starting with the waste problems. We are facing the problems on overcapacities in the landfill, the increasing of the waste generations, and the other problems. mostly our landfill is using open dumping, and there is a problem like landfill fires and the others. And the instant solution promoting by the government is with the incineration. Burning waste is the solution, and there is no waste again as a material, but it will be another problem with the health, with the environment, with the financial, and with the human right issue, especially to the communities, waste pickers, and inhabitants living near the waste-to-energy plants. I would like to start the story that can be a learning exchange between us in Indonesia that also fight more than 12 waste-to-energy incineration under the National Strategic Project, and maybe hundreds modular incineration, small-scale incinerator in the neighborhood. So I will start with the monumental situation, a huge tragedy in 2005. I think it will be the most sadness tragedy in the world related to the waste management issue. In 2005, early morning, more than 175 people living in the Louis Gajah landfill, one of the biggest landfill in Bandung, West Java province, the area from our friends, Yuang, that also attending this symposium. There is a tragedy, disaster. It's a double disaster. Exploded, landfill explode, and also landslide, and impacted to the 175 people living near the landfill died. And after this tragedy, the national government, the regional government taking the waste management as the serious thing. Previously, after our independence in 1945, the government never discussed about the waste. So the waste with more than 50 years is as our personal problems. So our waste is our responsibility, and there is no responsibility from the governments, even the national government or regional government. But after this tragedy, the government closed their eyes. Oh, there is a problem. There is an important thing, because it's a disaster. Lots of people died, and we need to taking this problem more seriously. And after that, the government elaborate and drafting waste management law, finished 3 years later after this tragedy. And then the government commemorating this tragedy as the national campaign every 21st February next month as the National Awareness Day. So in Indonesians reflections on this tragedy and try to increasing the public awareness that the waste problem is serious thing, not as small as the government thing before the tragedy. So unfortunately, after this tragedy, the government also thinking the instant solution. Okay, the problem is the waste already be a mountain, a hill like more than 60 meters high in the landfill. Okay, we need to burning, we need to destroying. Waste is our common enemy, and we need to destroy, we need to burning, and there is no waste again, and there is no problem. So it's also including in our waste management law 2008 with the tax, substantial tax. The government needs to develop waste management with environmentally sound management system. Yeah, ramah lingkungan in Indonesian. So with the term of the environmental sound management, the government try to promoting the high technology solutions that in the previous session Brex mentioned. It's not the high-tech solution, it's not the health solution, it's not the real solution, but it's a problem. But the government try to push, oh, we need to high-tech, we need to machine, we need to techno-fix, we need to technology, not a conventional mechanism. We need more than composting, more than waste segregation. So that's the story of the waste-to-energy promoting in Indonesian context. But in the waste management law, I think there is a good thing, because the government try to dealing with two substantial, try to accelerating waste treatment, like collecting, segregation, separating, composting, and the others. and also waste reductions, that the last part is not fully implemented by the government until 10 years later. And now we are pushing on that to the single-use plastic banning, to push the plastic production reductions, support in reuse and the others. So that's the late substantial not overseeing by the government, and government focusing on the waste treatment and promoting environmentally sound management technology like waste to energy. Okay, and the next one. So after the Louis Gajah tragedy, Bandung is the first location to promoting the waste to energy. It's not under the national strategy project. We call it as the pilot project. We need to try at least one project to prove that okay, we need the high technology and it's proven. But there is a community fight against that, because this WTE will build in the neighborhood with the high density, and fortunately this is the critical community, same SMS in Malaysia. I think that's good example. Like the community have the critical things, not NGO. So the struggle coming from the communities, that's the good thing. I think in Malaysia also with the same situation. And the community like inform Walhi as the civil society, please advocating us, please working with us, Walhi with YPBB, members of ASBI, member of Gaya, and with academics, with the civil society, working together to criticize this pilot project. As simple as it's a long fight from 2007 until 2016. It's almost 9 years, so it's a long struggle. And this project cancelled by the Bandung city government, so that's a good thing. With the consistency from the community, with the critical approach, not only like talking, not only said like tola incinerator, but also providing it's a near neighborhood. It will be impacted to health issue. It will be impacted to the vulnerable groups, to children, to the adult, and to the others vulnerable groups. So the government canceled the project in 2016, 9 years after the protest. But unfortunately, with the new governments in 2014, the government elaborate the ambitions of the waste to energy as part of the national strategy project. It looks like Belt Road Initiative by Chinese government. It's like mega infrastructure project and including waste to energy. It's not only one project, but 12 waste to energy project. But it's starting with the presidential regulations directly by central governments, starting with the 7 cities, and then revoking and move to the 12 cities locations. So that's the disappointed thing. The civil society take the legal actions with the presidential regulations. We won in the Supreme Court. That's good thing. That's good jurisprudence. But our president just thinking like, okay, Supreme Court canceling my presidential regulation. Okay, I will revoke. Okay, I will publish another presidential regulation on waste to energy. Previously 7 cities. Okay, I will add 5 cities. So 2 years after the cancellation of presidential regulation by Supreme Court, our president published a new regulation at 5 cities more waste to energy project under national strategy project. So that's the problem. And the other problem is waste to energy including in our nationally determined contribution as part of the Paris Agreement strategy. It is also part of the General Electricity Plan. It's also planning as the renewable energy contribution. So you can imagine like plastic, fossil fuel, claim as the renewable energy, like a SMS solar panel, for example, SMS wind power, for example, hydropower, for example. You can imagine plastic from the Indonesian government perspective is a renewable energy, because every day people generate the waste, so it's renewable. So it's not thinking about the material, but thinking about the feedstock, source of material is generate every day. the definition of renewable. So that's the problem, and it's difficult thing. We can like focusing on advocacy project by project. We need like more strategic advocacy from the national level to the regional level. So we need like community organizing. We need like a strong campaign, but also we need to national advocacy, like with the regulation, with the energy review and the other. So that's what the different situation between the first phase of the waste to energy project after the Louis Gajah landfill tragedy and after the new president's mega project planning. So that's the situations. And next, that's the map of the waste to energy project in Indonesia, mostly in Java Island. I'm coming from there because in our requirement, the city can build waste to energy if the daily waste generate is more than 100,000. But for the specific cities like Surakarta city, the son of the president is the mayor of this city in Surakarta. Now he is the candidate of vice president in Indonesia. They can build waste to energy. Even it's not fulfill the requirement with the 1,000 ton waste per day. So that's the political context. So mostly in Java, but also in Sumatra, one location in Palembang, in Sulawesi, Makassar, and Manado, and in Bali. So that's the map of the 12 waste to energy project in Indonesia. Move to the others. Next. So this is our critical notes. I think it will be the same situation. So based on our discussion, based on our capacity building with the GAIA, Global Alliance Incinerator Alternative, deep conversation with the scholars, with the academics, with the communities, we listing several critical things why we need to fight against this waste to energy project. The first one is the regulation that promoting waste to energy project is unconstitutional. It's violating our constitutional because we won in the Supreme Court with the environmental concern, with the substantial concern, with the upper regulations, but the president making force. Yeah, please don't hear the NGO voices. Yeah, we can go on with our project. So it's the legal problems. And the next is about the investment, because our anti-corruption commission has a publication. I think the same situation in Malaysia with the Badan Audit Keuangan Negara, KPK. We have an anti-corruption commission, and they have a recommendation like if the government continuing this project, there is a potential corruptions, there is a potential burdening the national budget more than 3.2 trillion rupiah. I think it will be more than 150 million US dollar annual, because the tipping fee, because the subsidy from the central government to the operational cost of the 12 waste to energy project if operating together. And the other problem I think is the dioxin and furan, because Indonesia, I think the same situation in Malaysia, we don't have a strict environmental standard, especially on the air pollution. Our air pollution standard is 1/3 from WHO standard. 1/3. It's not half standard, but 1/3 standard from WHO standard. So the other problems is it's not proven technology, and also the lack of meaningful participation. Next, it's already 15 minutes. So what we can do with this project, with this waste to energy, I think we can do lots of things like community organizing. I think the voice from the communities matters. And then forming a national coalition in Indonesia. We have a national coalition against waste burning, and then transformation to Alliance for Zero Waste Indonesia. We can completing each other, the expertise. Someone expertise in legal, someone expertise in the science, someone expertise in the provocation, like me for example, it's a matters. So we can mixing our expertise and working together. Someone expert in the design graphics lah, something like that. And then capacity building, working with the Gaia, law suites, we can try case by case, we can try national advocacy, research, campaign, lobbying, and also the important thing, financial monitoring advocacy, because it's linking with the international financial institution. Next, I think the last one. So who involved in WT project in Indonesia? I think it will be quite similar in Malaysia. I don't know the actors, but in Indonesia mostly from Japan and China. Sumitomo, Hitachi Zosen, Everbright Environment Investment, Shanghai Construction Energy, and the others, but mostly from China and Japan. Next. So small win, I think we need to be more optimistic because Bandung government cancel waste to energy, Bali government, Jakarta government also cancel waste to energy in 2021, 2023. We can delaying 7 projects, so only 2 now running, and we can delaying process. But we have a new challenging on the RDF, co-firing mechanism, and the government provide preparing new regulation to give more incentive to private sector to accelerating the establishment of waste to energy project. I think that's all from me. Our last statement, I think we need to working together. We need to demanding like eliminating false solutions, promoting zero waste solution. Toa incinerator.
Thank you. That was a great way to end the session. I like the way the last 2 slides, there are small wins. It's actually not small. You canceled incinerators. That's not small. But there are new challenges. And the important thing is to continue with the fight. And that's very inspiring. Okay, now let's start with the open forum. Questions from the participants. Yes.
Hi, my name is Manda. I'm a student. I have a question on since the first session actually, because the agenda for zero waste is I'd say a long-term plan. I mean, I fully support it. But all the slides so far has been talking about like I for one thought that the short-term alternative is landfills. But then as Abdul from Indonesia might know, like, for example, the Bantar Gebang landfill in Indonesia reaches full capacity, 40 million tons of waste there. So what is zero waste or Gaia or any organizations, any of the related organizations' immediate plan to deal with the waste that we have in existence? Because if we were to cut all, and again, I mean, I'm all for cutting incinerators. By the way, I think it's very bad. If you were to cut incinerators, if you were to cut landfills, stop building landfills, and have zero waste immediately, what would we to do with the existing zero waste, the immediate short-term plan to immediate plan? Thank you.
Any responses?
I think one thing very important is that we have to avoid from repeating the discourses used by the incinerator proponent and WTE proponents. One of the discourse they like to use is WTE incinerator can help you solve the problem faster than zero waste. If you look at Malaysian situation, the first WTE that is being built in Port Dickson, it was approved in year 2013. Until last year, 10 years later, then it only able to secure an operation license. And yet, in the international conference on renewable energy, the operator went to the conference and reported that the company is suffering a loss due to the wet waste in the waste stream. And these wet waste in the waste stream are not only causing economic loss to the company, but also it meant in the last 10 years, during the construction and operation commission testing,
there must be a lot of problems and which may have caused pollutions in the environment. So we have to understand evidence-based incineration has shown us that it is a very long process to build an incinerator with a lot of high capital, and it is a lock-in technology. A lock-in technology means you have a sign of concession with 30 years. And these 30 years after that, you have to have another policy of post-closure of incinerations to handle that. And now, in Malaysia, we basically don't have the policy. We were just being a copycat of European Union, thinking that 20 years ago, when European Union phased out in landfills, we copied them, and in Act 672, and with the Ministry of Housing and Local Development, come up with guidelines of post-landfills closure. But until now, there is no legislations on how to regulate incinerator and how to deal with the post-closure of incinerations. The waste to energy discourse in Malaysia come from Act 672, is based on municipal waste and convert to energy, mainly actually is using ex-landfills, capturing the methane gas to turn into energy. That doesn't give justification to the proponent to justify incineration is waste to energy. Similarly, when ex-landfills being converted into a park and called green space, the green labeling cannot be used for incineration as green energy. Thank you. But for zero waste, currently in the Act 672, at least there was 4 sections under Act 672 is immediately about waste reduction. And if you don't reduce waste, you have to be penalized. It's also about reuse, about recycling, and also, what's that? This was what repair. So, but this has been ignored for past 12 years. So we wasted our time. So waste to energy is a waste of energy, basically. So do we have to, in year 2023, do we still want to waste our time to approve the 7 to the residents and the citizens? Shall we just sit here and let the government to implement 7 ministry-funded WTE incineration that actually proven failure in European Union and United Nations? Do we, Malaysians, want to allow that to happen? The emperor's new clothes. Do we have to allow that to happen? And indeed, we also have legal framework that allow us to conduct zero waste immediately. Segregation at source. We need to talk about waste collection and not waste disposal. Act 672 have a loophole, is that it allowed privatization, and it was capitalized by proponents to propose all these mega expensive high capital WTE incineration project as a PPP, public-private partnership project. And this whole practice has already lumping waste and energy together without any reflections, without any deconstruction, without thinking what is the global trend. We have to delink waste from energy. We have to focus on the renewable energy that do not contribute to climate crisis. Thank you.
Our country has 514 cities and regency. It means we have the same number of landfill. And the current situations, mostly using open dumping, just dumping your waste in the area, for example, not sanitary landfill, not controlled landfill. And the implications is overcapacities. There is a problems. Last year, 38 landfill burning and several landfill closed due to the overcapacities. So that's the existing situation. But if our organization, if our alliance, if civil society talking about we don't want waste to energy and how we can promote the solution, is the the zero waste solution can solve the waste emergency, waste crisis situation. I think we need like a multi-level strategy, multi-level solution, because the standing position on the standing position to opposing the waste to energy is the clear positions, and then we try to identifying. In the national context, our waste composition is mostly 50% in the municipal area is organic waste. In the rural area is 60%. So now we move to solving the solution also. If we can push the government banning the organic waste and supporting the communities to composting, to treatment with the household or neighborhood collective treatment on the organic, at least we can reducing our landfill burden almost 50 and 60%, depends on the area, in the urban area or rural area. So that's what we can do in the organic context to reducing the burden of the landfill. And the context of the plastic waste, 18% of the waste composition in Indonesia is plastic waste, dominantly by plastic bag and sachet. We cannot campaigning specific on sachet because it's the national authority, but we can starting with the single-use plastic banning. Now more than 100 city level has a regulation on single-use plastic banning in the 3 categories mostly, plastic bag, straw and polystyrene, styrofoam in Indonesian context. So it can reducing like 1%, maybe no more than 1%, but it's also contribute, like it's also solutions. But we still have problem with the existing waste. In Bantar Gebang, I think more than 40 million existing waste, 40 million ton existing waste, even with the waste to energy. In Bantar Gebang, there is a prototype by the coordinating Ministry of Maritime and Investment, pilot project of waste to energy with the 100 until 200 ton capacity per day. They cannot process existing waste actually because it's mixing with the soil, it's mixing with the besi, aku nggak tahu bahasa Inggrisnya, I don't know, the metal, it's mixing with the other, so they cannot processing the existing waste actually. So while he call it as the situs archaeologis, it's an archaeological site that cannot doing anything. So the government promoting landfill mining, for example, waste to energy cannot process the archaeological waste actually. So our effort is to mitigate the more problems in the future, but we cannot have the single solution. So what we can do, like supporting the solution to reducing the organic waste, supporting the single-use plastic banning, and try to accelerating the infrastructure, because mostly overdumping, but we try to 100% landfill in Indonesia is control landfill, like it can be separate, segregation, and build recycling facilities and the others. But it's mitigation, I think, not solving the archaeological waste with hundreds, millions waste. I don't know the answers. Legacy waste. Thank you.
All right, thank you. May we ask the speakers to put the mics more closer to their lips, because the online speakers, the online audience can't hear. Nina, briefly, what's the immediate solutions?
In the Philippines, landfill is only the legally option for disposal, and what we are doing right now to address this is to push for more upstream solutions, such as policy banning for SUPs, regulation on production at the same time. So zero waste is a really long way to go, but it is possible. It's also proven effective. So we just need to amplify it and promote zero waste, like how this WTE people promote this false solution. So we need to address the problem where it started, and our problem in plastic pollution starts in production. So
thank you, Nina. And I think that question was also addressed to Gaia, and I'm happy that Froy is here and I'm moderating. I don't need to answer that as a moderator, but we have a resource speaker. What's the response from Gaia?
2 points. I think, as mentioned this morning, we need to be asking the right questions in the context of the problem that we are trying to solve. Asking the question, what we do with the waste right now, is a very valid question. But in the context of justifying waste to energy, it is never a consideration, right? Second point is we need to change this narrative that zero waste is a long solution and WT is an immediate solution. If you invest the same money on WT on zero waste, you can make your city zero waste in 1 year. You can reduce through composting, recycling, and waste reduction your waste by 80% in 6 months. With incinerators, you can do that. And the third point, as what you highlighted, is that the lock-in. We can be tempted and say, okay, let's do waste-to-energy incinerator just to address the current waste right now. But with the amount of investment it needs, you need to feed that beast for 30 years just so the investment would be returned. Right? So, yes, we need to solve the problem of the waste now, but not to use it as a justification for incinerator. As Linya mentioned, there are upstream solutions to cut the waste right now. And admittedly, there are still no acceptable solutions on legacy waste. But the problem is that we keep on using legacy waste to justify long-term false solutions. Let's cut. So if you have a flowing tap in your house, if your floor is flooding, what would be the first thing that you would do? Would you mop the floor? Or would you close the tap first? Let's stop the tap first before we talk about what happens with the water on the floor right now.
Okay. Question. I think that's the last question because it's already... I think we can have one more.
My question is, what can we do at this point in time? I'm happy to see all of you here and the organizers on the topic. But the problem is that the state government, the federal government, the decision makers are listening to those salesmen who says that waste to energy is renewable energy. And they say that there will be a reduction. Of course, comparative to the landfill is a reduction. But here we know that when you burn something, it doesn't disappear. It becomes toxic gas. I think we need to be able to explain to the public and to the decision makers, especially my Menteri Besar. He thinks that this new technology is very safe. And I think we should stop talking about the older technologies of the 80s. He keeps using that to say that it is safe. We are talking about today, we are talking about studies, we are talking about the upgrading of the European IED, we are talking about decisions made in December. This is one way, and there is not one single independent report to say that it is safe. I think we need to look at it from this point, and I'm very happy that you are able to come, but I hope that more people will be able to listen and understand that waste to energy is not renewable energy. And we are facing, especially my constituents are facing not one but 2 incinerators within 15 kilometers. So I hope all of you will join together and let the truth be known. Thank you.
Right. Okay, we have to read online questions. Is it okay? And then online questions.
YP, I agree with you. I think this morning I spoke. Maybe you were not there, but
Who is the audience of the online?
What I'm trying to say here is this. Somehow or other, the government refused to listen to learned people, but they willing to listen to stories. This is actually, this is another way, but what I say is, common sense should prevail, rather than, orang Melayu cakap, menegakkan benang basah. This is the problem. So, You know, somebody was saying that with the 4.5 or 5 billion that you actually invest, okay. Somebody was saying also like the archaeological site, okay, fine. Alright, I give you some money, please explore the archaeological site, treat the existing waste, give me where is the renewable, where is the recyclable, where the reuse, all those sort of things, find it out. Then we start from zero and we go against this installation. Because I think we need to work it out, how should I say, smartly. And I think local solution is still the best. Local solution. You ask the people at the lower ranking, they give you very common sense. Sometimes it's faster than even whatever people at the top are thinking, because there's always these what I call theories and theories and theories and theories. Sorry.
Local solutions. Thank you. Alright, this question is, I think, for you and me. Is solar sustainable renewable energy in Malaysia, given that we are a tropical country where forests, precious agricultural land, will be used to make way for solar deployment?
Thank you. Thank you for that question.
Thank you for that question. Because today our sharing is focused on waste to energy, that's why my presentation was not totally in the context of renewable energy. Actually, Malaysia started with the Renewable Energy Act, was mooted by, first is looking into solar energy as a renewable energy. So it wasn't waste only come into the discourse. At the same time, when someone proposed, waste also can be made use for renewable energy. So in Malaysia, we have the act, we have regulations to regulate solar energy productions. And the problem with WTE incineration is that they co-opted turbine energy, the wind energy, into their project by using the term Integrated Waste Management Center, by justifying that even in Batu Arang, the SGEP project, they will build turbines on the sites next to the incinerators. So this is really evil in doing so, by confusing general public and also general civil servants in the state council, to differentiate between hydropower, solar power, and waste to energy power are different. They are different source of renewable energy. And waste to energy is very, very harmful to the environment and earth, and already declared we need to stop by building or financing or operating waste to energy incineration by United States, also European Union. We government, we citizens and residents have to take this to heart and tell the government again and again, we don't against renewable energy, but we against waste to energy incineration. Thank you.
Thank you. Another online question for Linia Sarmiento. Are there funds available to develop non-incinerator solutions?
For our perspective, in the funds available for non-incinerator, under our project, we have this support that we're giving to our project partners, our local, our organization members. We are now having this. We are now starting with small and medium enterprises, more on innovative solution on their packaging, and then at the same time on how these retail stores that we initially have right now, we want to amplify it to other cities. We have this kind of idea to reach them and give them the support on how are they going to more likely replicate the store to other cities, so that the refilling, the reuse economy is more accessible and more available to other cities at the same time. Here in Philippines, in Quezon City, we have more than 5 refilling station stores, and we also have in Visayas and Luzon. They just need a support on how are they going to replicate their initiatives to other cities. So with the help of our partner with the Center for Renewable Energy and Sustainable Technology, or the CREST, we are also exploring for the biodigester, in which this is more on the biodegradable waste, more on food waste, on how are they going to convert it into fertilizers without really dealing with problematic impact on the environment rather. So there's a fund also for the non-incinerators when you're looking for it, and especially those organizations that are dealing with the zero waste. It's more on support, local support to amplify our promotion for this solution, rather than focusing on the technologies that needs a billion investment that is also destructive to the environment. So that's, thank you po.
Thanks, Nina. So Troy, would you like to add more on the public funds available for in the Philippines?
Well, actually 2 points, just to respond to the minister a while ago. Yes, it is very important that we debunk the renewable energy argument, but in fact I would go beyond it and say that debunk even the energy argument. Because in all examples around the world, not one has been successful in providing energy. In many cases, they're actually energy deficient. Especially if your waste is wet, you need more energy to burn the waste than whatever you'll get from it. Japan, for example, in Metro Tokyo, they have 19 incinerators. Because if you go to Japan, they have 2 streams of waste, for incineration and for recycling. Majority are for incineration. They have 19 incinerators in Metro Tokyo alone. You would imagine that with 19 incinerators, you will provide big energy. And yet, when I was there, I asked the companies, how much of energy are you giving the grid? And they said, at best, 2%. 19 incinerators at a cost of several $billion only to give you 2%. If you invest that in solar and other REs, it could probably be more than enough to cover 50% of your energy needs. So yes, it's not renewable energy, but in most cases, it's not even a dependent source of energy. Now, on the second point, is there enough money? Right now, there's not enough money for the right solutions. But the question is, if they can spend $1 billion to build one facility for one city, why is there money for false solutions and not for the right solutions? In the Philippines, we challenge the government. One incinerator for one city is $1 billion. We tell them, give us $1 billion, we'll make the whole Philippines zero waste. Because it's local, low cost. And it is proven to happen, that it is possible, right? So maybe that's one of our advocacy action. Push really for governments, not just the governments, but even IFIs, ADB, the Asian Development Bank, the IIIB, and all these other institutions, to instead of funding false solutions, fund the right solutions. And let's also push for policies for corporates to fund their share in solving this problem. Because I think someone mentioned the problem a while ago, Because I think someone mentioned the problem a while ago, privatizing waste management in our countries. I think that's a double whammy for us. Why? The corporates, the investors, the rich, earn money in selling these products to us. And yet we expect them to earn money to solve these problems that they created in the first place. Waste management should be a public service that the cost should be borne by those who are responsible, not by our communities. So if there's no money for the right solutions, let demand for the money to be diverted from false solutions into the right solutions.
And we have space for a last question. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me? Hi, I'm Darin. I'm a university student from University of Nottingham, Malaysia. And I'm just quite curious for the NGOs like Gaia, and I've heard from, talkers from Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia are talking about how governments are the what do you call it? Are pro-WTE as being mentioned all around. But I'm not going to use the word government here. I'm just going to use the word decision makers because they're the leaders. So how, as the organizations, how do you talk to the government and also talk to the local communities, because that's a different type of groups, you know what I mean? Like they're local communities, you have to talk to them in a different way, and to the government, you have to talk to them in a different way as well. So I'm just curious on how do you deal with that, and how do you that's how do you deal with that basically. Thank you.
Terima kasih for the important questions. Since our advocacy and campaign against waste to energy starting in 2007, we have a different approach. Actually, not WALHI as the single organization, but mostly our alliance, because we are working together with the different perspective, different expertise. So if we communicate with the governments, we try to provide scientific evidence, research, the experience in the different countries, because our government always mentioning we need to follow the pathway from the developed countries. We need to follow Singapore, we need to follow Japan, we need to follow Denmark. We have a proposal from DANIDA, Denmark Development Agency, for example. We have a field visit to the Japan. So we need to have a comparative studies, like where we oppose, is there any scientific evidence. So that's the strategy to discuss with the governments, with the politicians. But we also try to make it like this is the public demands, because the politician always thinking about the vote, about the voting. So we need to make it like this is the public aspiration. But we also communicate with the government through the litigations. We take president to the Supreme Court, we won. Supreme Court revoked the presidential regulation, but unfortunately he published another presidential regulations. We can talk with the legal actions if it's possible. And with the communities, I think we need to have a clear position. If the communities, like in Malaysia, have a critical things, I think NGO can be a partner, like working together. Community has the information from the field, updating regularly. Oh, Mas Gofar, yeah, Mr. Gofar, there is update the impact of the incinerations, air pollution, and so on and so on. So we can assist, like please report to the regional government, to the media, to the others. So it depends on the situation to the communities. But I think like equal communication between NGO and community is the key factors. Like we can working together, completing each other, and like transparency. Like okay, we can take legal action, but there is a consequence. We can take a research, we can take another strategy, we can demonstration, for example, big demonstration, there is a consequence, but we discuss it together, like transparency, trust, and make it as the common vision in the community. I think what's the experience of WALHI with the two approach between the government and the communities. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your question. It's a very important question for Malaysian. In general, we are lack of civil engagement, we lack of democratic culture, democratic practice in the country. Therefore, the discourse saying that, oh, they are the decision makers, the community only reflect, only give feedback. This framework already wrong. Very wrong, and I will provide that science-based approach, also social science-based approach. The evidence proven in Malaysia, and later we will have a researcher from China. It is the no backyard movement, community protests against incineration have prompted the government, so-called decision makers, to think seriously, to come up with legal framework, to come up with policies. There is a very dynamic process because the people in position of power and the people who live their life and have the democratic right as citizens. So this is very important also. My own experience, I was a community member in Kajang. Yes, your university, we fought for the place without Broga incinerator. I was just a community member. But now I'm here, sitting here, share with you the information, the knowledge, and the research. So do not see community member as less intelligent and less in the hierarchy. Never about I talk to the community. Always is not we and they, but we. I am the community. I am the citizens. I am the residents. How do I want my life in the future? And how do I get involved in the democratic process? And therefore, that's why in my presentations, in a country with governance, democratic process actually is in place. But unfortunately, those in position of power do not share the information. And currently, one of the piece of legislation we can make use of is the Act 174, the Environmental Quality Act. And also the EIA requirement is under that act, and in the EIA requirement, there are 3 very important plans for democratic engagement. The National Physical Plan, the Structure Plan, and the Local Rancangan Tempatan, Local Plan. And back then, Broga residents really engaged the structure plan to identify it was a water catchment area and it was a forest reserve and fought very hard against it. And currently, Batu Arang residents also involved in engaging the local plan 2030 and against the de-gazetizations of that piece of land into heavy industrial zone. So actually, if we really pay attention to the democratic process and engage, there is always room for public inspection. There's always room for public participation. There's a term called public inspection. As community, as individual, we are powerful. Thank you.
And this time, Nina, would you like to add?
Very shortly now, we recognize that the government as a decision makers of our respective countries, so they have the power to make decisions that can do good or bad for us. So as for, in the perspective of the CSO in the Philippines, we always actively participating in different consultations and then participate on discussions that really need our perspective so that they can understand what's really going on the ground. So we communicate with them by going on by providing them our position on a certain issues, and we also at the same time demand for their transparency so the public trust will remain intact. So public participation is very powerful. We just need to make our leaders become aware of the fact that we are the reason why they have the power to make such decisions. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that question was also directed to Gaia. So Rex, do you want to add? How do we communicate to different levels of decision makers, communities?
You may. I wonder if I can help to answer the question. Jackson from China.
Okay, Jackson from China.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. When we talk about how do we communicate with different stakeholders like the neighborhood and the government, and first it's about the neighborhood. Before 2018, over half province we have the not in my backyard movement about the waste incineration plants. It's about its location and it's about its building and its operation. That's why I know the number. It's because the government is monitoring the movement, is monitoring the data. And the number is from the ME, which is Ministry of Environmental and Ecological. So if in the community we have the not in my backyard movement and the government will know. And after 2018, the ME issued the report and says that if you want to construct a new waste incineration plant, you must consider this movements, and you must consider if there will cause any unstable factors. So, because the construction of waste incineration plants is not only decided by the ME, it's also decided by other departments like the local government and about the household department. So, if the ME want to give the suggestion and the other departments, they need to listen. So, I think from this perspective, for the neighborhood, we should, if you have any chance, you should have the Not in My Backyard movement. And another part is about stance. And when you talk with the government and we talk with the university and the researchers and also the neighborhoods, you need to give them the sense, the very simple but at a very up-to-date and stable proof the waste incineration.
Is anyone connected with the internet of the building? Can we just
research the past years, and it's all in China, and you need to follow this up-to-date research and give the data to all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is our next speaker, and Brett, I believe you want to add something.
So I think this actually ties us in quite nicely to the next part. But I think just one last thing. We were mentioning banks a lot. And I think when it comes to communicating the international financial institutions, big banks, ADB, AIB, World Bank, those are also institutions that do have a lot of power, and we should be talking to and we should be engaging with. For instance, social media pressure, or engaging in any of their events if possible. When it comes, and one last thing, when it comes to policymakers, it seems that one of the better ways to engage with them might be questioning the cost effectiveness of their decisions. What are the costs right now? What are the costs down the line? And what are perhaps some hidden costs? Some things that they may not be talking about. So for instance, when it comes to incinerators, usually they will say, we won't have landfills anyway. But as proven here by several of our speakers, they always result in toxic ash, and then you do always have to increase your landfills. I think now we can transition to the next panel, unless there's a yeah. Okay, so I guess another round of applause to our panel. Very dynamic panel, yeah. So Mr. Jiachen will and audience, we will go through another round of questions and prizes, just very quickly, maybe for a couple minutes, 3 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next panel.
Thank you.
Big prizes at stake.
Big prizes at stake. Okay, again, just raise your hand or just shout the answer maybe if you have it. Where is the zero waste city in Malaysia? Penang, correct. Okay, help me see who's in first. Question number 2. Where is toxic ash from incinerators stored? Yeah. Landfills. Okay, question number 3.
No, I think that one was okay. Okay. I think maybe the thing on the screen time.
Does incineration produce renewable energy? No. Who answered first?
Almost 6 of them.
I don't know if they can share the prize.
Wait, you decide who came first.
I didn't hear. I was looking at the screen. Next question. Next question.
Next question. Raise your hand, yeah?
Yeah.
And see who's the first one to raise.
Okay.
You'll see.
In Southeast Asia, how many percent of total waste is organic waste? Yes, 50 to 70%, something like that. Right.
Okay. Is that it?
Was that it?
Yes.
Was that all of them? Okay.
We'll have another session.
All right, so
We have to stay on.
I guess if Mr. Jia Cheng is ready.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was loud. To introduce our next speaker, our next speaker.
Can I share my PowerPoint, my slide myself?
We can share your slides unless you. Would you prefer to share your own slides?
If you can see that?
Yes.
Yes? Oh, cool.
Just to introduce Mr. Jia Cheng. Mr. Li Jiasheng is a researcher with both the Wuhu Ecology Center and Shenzhen Zero Waste.
I cannot hear anyone talking. Yeah. So if you can see that, give me okay. Okay.
We can hear you, Mr. Li.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
I think everyone can see that.
So I'll just introduce you, Mr. Li, very quickly. Mr. Li Jiasheng is a researcher with both the Wuhu Ecology Center and Shenzhen Zero Waste, and has a long-standing interest in China's waste management sector. Take it away, Mr. Li.
Yeah, I think I cannot hear any voice, but I think it's my part, right?
Hello, Mr. Li?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yes. Please go ahead, sir.
It's cool. Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jia Cheng from China, and I work for two NGOs in the meantime, Wuhu Ecology Center and Shenzhen Zero Waste. And thanks for the invitation from UMA, and I want to share the waste incineration situation in China and our NGOs' effort in the past years. As I know that there are some Chinese participants in the meeting, and the slide is in both English and Chinese. And thanks everyone for your time. And this is a catalog, including the waste industry in China, the waste incineration law in China, NGOs work on information disclosure, NGOs work on scientific popularization and the overcapacity of incineration would restrain the recycle. And first is about the data. From this chart, you could see that both capacity and the disposal by the incineration in China in the past years increased very fast. And in the same time, as the Chinese government defined the waste to energy as a green technology and allowed the private sector into the industrial, there is a serious overcapacity among countries and especially in some developed provinces. And along with the waste sorting policy, the incineration overcapacity rate in 2022 is already more than 30%. And from the open online monitoring platform, everyone can see every waste incineration plant, location, capacity, and pollution emission data. And now, from the map, you can see that there are more than 1,000 waste incineration factories among the China. And in China, the income of waste incineration plants consists of disposal fee, the benchmark electricity price, national electricity subsidy, and the provincial electricity subsidy. Because of so-called green energy technology, the plants can have the subsidies, and that's why the industry developed very fast. But there's a good news. Starting from 2018, the subsidy is decreasing. Why? Because the central government and the local government, they couldn't afford the high price of the subsidy. And according to our the investigation launched by Wuhu Ecological Center, which is our organization, in 2022, the investigation showed that the 11 waste incineration plants located in 5 provinces were owned by the following fees by the government, including the national electricity price subsidy, which is 340 million yuan, and the provincial electric subsidy, which is 75 million yuan. It's only 11 with incineration plants. And China, we have more than 1,000, so we can know that the government cannot pay the price. And another reason why the subsidy decreased is because that the government is seeing its negative part about the waste to energy, including low energy efficient and high greenhouse gas emissions. And the data shows that China incinerated more than 200 million tons of waste in 2022, and 15% of which is plastic waste. And the plastic waste is almost 30 million tons. And the greenhouse gas emission from the waste incineration exceeds 100 million tons carbon dioxide equivalent. But only 20% of the energy is converted into the electric energy, which is the energy efficient is only 20%. The 20% energy efficient is similar to Europe and similar to US. And for Southeast Asia and other countries, I think the energy efficient can be higher than that. So which is very efficient. And the second part is the waste incineration law in China. First is about the pollution standards. Right now, from the national level and the provincial level, China has strict emission standard, and in some items, the provincial standard is stricter than the EU standard. And from some perspective, the strict standard requires the company to invest more on the emission control system, and there will be the good effect, which is the less investors who want to make big money, they will not join this industry, and there will be more responsible investors if the government must have the incineration plants. And there's another law, and starting from 2017, as there are too many, not in my background movement, the ME, Ministry of Ecology and the Environment, launched the new law, and the new law requires all waste incineration plants open to the public. And as for me, I have visited more than 40 plants in person in the past 2 years. And from my view, it's another way available for the neighborhood and for the public to supervise the industry. And 3 years later, which is in 2020, a set of legal requirements were introduced by the central government. The new law requires all waste incineration to disclose real-time environmental information such as the processing capacity, the air pollution emission, and the incinerator's temperature. And this work highly connected to our NGO's efforts in the past years. So it's about the third part, and because in 2012, Wuhu Ecological Center created our information platform websites, and after we have the website, we applied for incineration pollution emission data from local government across the country. And after we have the data, we make it public. And by 2020, more than 2 million people have logged on this website, including residents, academics, and the government. And there are many researchers published by using the information from the website and provided and proved that some laws are not based on the science and give the government pressure to reverse this law. And after 2020, as the government platform went live, this private website launched by us also went offline at the same time. And now, according to the Environmental Protection Law of China, we also apply for the manual pollution monitoring data, which is by hand data. They are not disclosed on the website, but the government will disclose it if you apply for that. So we apply for the on-hand monitoring data from the government and make it public by year. And also according to the law, NGOs can also sue the government or the company because it can sue the government or the company if they don't disclose information. And sometimes our NGO will win the case. And the fourth part is about NGOs' work on scientific popularization. Now, since the waste incineration involves a lot of scientific knowledge, including dioxin, heavy metal, greenhouse gas emission, and health effects and the environmental effects, and it's very difficult for residents, for the public to find and download the scientific articles. Therefore, Chinese NGOs will edit academic articles, also some reports from Zero Waste Europe and reports from other international organizations, and we will edit these reports and articles into easy to understand Chinese articles. And last year we edited more than 40 academic research articles, including Chinese articles and English articles, and more than 50,000 people read these articles. And among these people, they are residents and they are academics, and also they are some from the government. And the fifth part is that we found that the overcapacity of the incineration would restrain the recycle. And right now we are campaigning about this systematic problem. The model studies have proven that the waste incineration overcapacity and its high subsidy policy will seriously influence the development of the recycling industry. And from this model, you can see that the R1 is a current recycling amount. And if the subsidy policy is balanced, the subsidy for incineration and subsidy for the recycling, the R1 will become R2. R1 will become the R2. And the last part is my suggestions for China and other countries, including we need to require the government to have the strict pollution emission standard, and we need to require for information disclosure and pay attention to the science popularization work, and work close with researchers and pay attention to the impact of waste incineration on the recycling industry. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Li Jiasheng. I'm quite surprised by the number of incinerators in China. So, is Mr. Hattori ready? Yes? Our next speaker is Yuichiro Hattori, a former municipal waste reduction officer in Japan. He worked with Gaia for a few years, and now he's an author and translator of various books about sustainability, including Zero Waste Home and Life Without Plastic. Please give it up for Mr. Yuichiro Hattori.
Yeah,
we can hear you, yes?
Okay, good. So, hi everyone, although I can't see you. I'm Yuichiro, talking from Japan, and as Rex introduced me, I worked formerly as a waste management officer of a local government in Japan. And after that, I worked with Gaia for a few years. So today, I'm going to show you the latest trend of municipal solid waste management and incineration in Japan. As many of you may know, Japan is known to be the most incinerator-intensive country in the world. Almost every municipality in Japan depends heavily on incineration, and it is said that the majority of the incinerators in the world are located in Japan. But I just heard from Jian's talk that China has more than 1,000 incinerators now. I didn't know about that, so maybe China overtook the position from Japan. But anyway, Japan has really many incinerators. But however, due to the language barrier or some other reasons, there is not much information available in English, which shows what's really going on in Japan and what kind of problems actually exist about incinerators in Japan. So let's get a brief overview of that today. So Japan is the most incineration-oriented country in the world, and this is the OECD ranking of incineration-oriented countries. As you see, Japan is ranked number 1 with 79%, which means that Japan is incinerating 79% of its municipal solid waste. The second ranked Finland's percentage is much lower at 57%, so it's clear Japan is so high and no other country can match it. As you look at the graph, UK is at 39%, South Korea at 25%, USA at 12%, so you can see that Japan is so unusually high. So let's take a glance of incineration in Japan. As of 2021, the number of incinerators in Japan was 1,028, and 80% of the total municipal solid waste generated was incinerated, while just 1% was landfill and 20% recycled. Look at this bar graph. Sorry, I couldn't update that data of the graph, so the data in the graph are quite old, but the numbers I'm showing above are new. So the graph shows the trend since 2000, and you can see that the waste disposal methods in Japan have not changed much. The red part, which is incineration, has always been dominant. So I'm going to explain the historical background. Why are there so many incinerators in Japan? It all started when Japan had a rapid economic growth in the 1960s. The country faced shortage of landfills and public health concerns, and the central government took a strong policy to promote incineration to solve the situation. According to the government's white paper, landfill was still dominant as of 1965, as 38% of the waste was incinerated and 40% was landfill at that time. Within just 4 years from there, the population went up by 25%, and the amount of waste generated increased by more than 50%. And in this period, the incineration more than doubled to cover 51% of the waste, despite the rapid increase of the waste generation itself. An enormous amount of governmental subsidy was invested in construction of incinerators, and after the National Waste Management Law was set in 1970, the number of incinerators in Japan already reached 1964 by 1975. Ever since, incineration has been a precondition in Japan. Still today, in Japan, very few people question this situation about incinerators, and most Japanese people simply don't understand that landfill is much more common in the world. If you point this out to Japanese people, they will generally say, because we are a small country and don't have enough space for landfill, or it's not hygienic to landfill waste without burning it, or come on, it's a terrible idea to bury waste as is, etc., etc. The risk of incineration is not shared among many people, and we see very few anti-incineration campaigns beyond just local NIMBY movements. It's almost like in Japan, the concern for not having incineration is much more strong than the concern for having incineration. I'd like to also emphasize that small countries don't necessarily lack space for landfill. There are so many countries in the world which are smaller than Japan: Switzerland, Holland, Belgium, South Korea, Hong Kong, and none of them rely as heavily on incineration as Japan. So problem one, I would like to point out the problems of incineration in Japan. First of all, the incinerators in Japan are actually quite inefficient. And the vast majority of the incinerators in Japan are extremely small sized compared to the incinerators in the US or EU. The average capacity is only 175 tons per day, and over 80% are smaller than 300 tons per day. 26% are actually less than 50 tons per day, which is very small. Thus, not many of them can actually generate power. In 2021, only 40% of the incinerators in Japan generated power. And this number includes those cases where the electricity generated was not enough to cover the operation of the plant itself. 29% of the incinerators have no thermal recovery at all. They just burn the waste and recover nothing. The remaining 30% didn't generate power, but utilized heat for district heating, which is quite common in Japan. Overall, waste-to-energy has yet to expand in Japan, and it's difficult under this current situation where most incinerators are very small. So another
either didn't work or were inefficient. Are you aware of this? This study was done by an EU consultant several years ago.
About the wish and the AD composting system. And if the conclusion is like that, if there's no systematic waste sorting system and efficient waste sorting system, and the composting and also the waste to energy cannot be that efficient. And we got lesson from the EU, and the waste to energy efficiency can be higher than 20% if the waste will generate electric. So, from my perspective, the reduce is the first way to solve the waste problem, not the scale the waste to energy incineration. Also, it's not the scale of composting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jashin. Anyone from the live audience? There is another one from the online. Ah, yes, go on.
Check. Thank you, Mr. Cheng and Mr. Yuichiro. My question is, with more than 1,000 incinerator in each country, China and Japan, and there is a transparency law, there is a strict environmental regulation. I would like to know, is there any pollutions, is there any complaint from the community since the operational of the incinerations? Because in Indonesia we are worried about the impact of this incineration. So based on the experience more than 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, how the response of the communities with the operational of the waste to energy project with the existing standard in these countries? And the second question, is there any intention from China government and Japan government to transfer of technology, like develop more incineration outside the countries, like in Indonesia dominantly by China and Japanese companies? So is there any intentional to transfer incineration outside the countries? Thank you.
Yeah, maybe you should know first. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I go first about pollution. As I explained, law enforcement has been very good, stable in Japan, and so we have law and we respect the law. So of course pollution is not 0%, and I have concern myself, but there is not much concern raised even from scientists in Japan about pollution. So there is not so many accidents or pollution happening because of incinerators in Japan. So I of course don't say that pollution is 0, but at least at the like apparent pollution has not been happening.
Yeah, about the first question, as I explained, that China has the strict emission standards, but this is one thing. If you have a standard, but if you burn a big amount of waste, also it will influence people's house, neighbors' house. So China has another standard, which is the waste incineration plants. The safer distance from the neighborhood must be higher than 300 meters. And this is a law launched like 20 years ago. And the last year, there's a new study about the safe distance. What distance is safe? And this is a research done by a researcher who lives near the plants, because she had a concern that if the 300 is really safe distance. And according to her research, the safe distance is at least 1.5 kilometers, which means if you live near the plants with the incineration plants, the safe distance must be 1.5 kilometers. And it's a result with a very strict emission standard. And if in your country, if there's no strict emission standard, and the distance, the safe distance must be maybe 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers or farther than that. And about the second question, I didn't hear it clearly, but I think it's a question about if there's any connection, maybe some technology transfer from China to Southeast Asia countries. And if it's about this question, I think there are many chances with the incineration companies. If they cannot get the new market from China, they will invest in Southeast Asia. There are another reason, like in most of Southeast Asia countries, there is no emission standards, which means they don't need to invest the emission control system, which will help them to make good money. This is what I was taught when I talked with the companies. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more.
Hi, I'm Ms. Lee. My question is to both of the speakers. I understand that your country has very stringent emission standard, right? Could I know what kind of standards are being used in your country for the air pollution?
You mean technology?
The standards. Could I know
I didn't hear the key point.
Yeah, could I know what kind of standards are being used to measure the air pollution, since you mentioned that your country are using very stringent measures to monitor the incinerator?
Sorry, I don't have the knowledge about the technology. Maybe Hashiro.
This is not technology, it's on the standard, the guidelines that are being used, the standards that are being used to measure the air pollution.
Okay, maybe Yoshino, if you can answer it first.
Yeah, but actually I'm the same as Jajan. It's all technical and it's really detailed, I think. So it's all about, like CO or dioxin or, many kinds of chemical substances trapped. And, so technically there is also regulations about the forms and the whole entire systems are being regulated. So I can't say it clearly now, but there is some really strict law about it.
I can add that, and if you check the air pollution control items, the China control items is similar to EU items. So if you check the EU standards, and you will see that China have the similar standard. Also, the China standard will have the English version, and you can download it from the website. Yeah, it's clear. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We have just one last question. This one is addressed to Mr. Hattori. What are the drivers of zero waste in Kamikatsu and Shibushi?
Yeah, so, as I explained, I think that, the fact that they didn't have an incinerator really drive them to work really hard to, minimize their waste. Because if you can burn waste just as is, it's really easy to, manage their waste. So there is not much incentive to, promote zero waste in Japan. But, if you don't have an incinerator, you really have to minimize waste by recycling or sorting, segregating everything. So, that's what Kamikatsu or Shibushi and Oki did.
Thank you very much. We have follow-up?
Hello. I just want to know about how to handle fly ash and bottom ash in China and Japan. And is there any human health case in near of the project? Thank you.
I'm sorry, human what?
I didn't hear that.
How to handle fly ash and bottom ash? Residual.
I think the question is how to handle fly ash and bottom ash.
Fly ash. Okay. Yeah, so again, it's technical, and I'm sorry that I can't really answer the detailed. But as I explained in the fly ash and the insulated ash is tracked really strictly in Japan. So, but it goes in landfill, but not just ordinary landfill. But there are specifically designated landfills throughout the country. So all the local governments have to report, which designated landfills they are going to use for fly ash and incinerated ash for the specific periods, and they do that.
Yeah, and for China, we have the standard for the bottom ash and the fly ash, especially about the heavy metal part. Because the heavy metal is the most important pollution from the bottom ash and the fly ash. And before 2018 or something, and for the fly ash, the China government required the fly ash have its very special landfill to landfill that. But after that year, as there are too many fly ash generated from the plants, the government allowed the fly ash into the mixed waste landfill. So we don't think it's a safe way to landfill the fly ash, but it's the cheapest way right now. There are other technology about the fly ash, but which is very expensive for the company and for the government. And if you are interested about the technology, you can search the research. I don't know their technology in Chinese, but it's very so technology. I cannot say it in English. Sorry. Yeah.
And what human health implications in their project? Human health implications. And is there any human health impact from the project near to communities?
Health concern.
I think the question was, are there any human health impacts or any human health concerns in communities where incinerators are located?
In Japan, at least as far as I know, there's not much concern of that kind. So, of course, we have NIMBY movements. So if, an incinerator construction plan is raised, we have opposition movements. But it's just for, not really actual health concerns or something, but, we don't want incinerators in our neighborhood. So that's just NIMBYism. And beyond that, I don't think Japan has been facing that sort of health concerns because we have law and we have been, respecting the law quite well.
Yeah, like in China, we have another law which requires the company and the local government to monitoring the surrounding environment of the plants, including like the heavy metal in soil. And also I know that there are report from EU, like 2 years ago, a serious report about the influence of waste incineration plants to the food, like eggs, around the plants. And if you're interested, you can search that with Zero Waste Europe. They have this report. And as Europe has the food standard for everything, and they found that the dioxin in eggs, which around the plants, exceed the standard. So, which means it will influence people's health. But there is no study that the waste incineration plants cause any death or cancer in China. I don't know any case that proved this connection.
Thank you very much. And another round of applause, please, for Mr. Yushiro.
Yeah, I have something to add. Only one thing. Like Yoshino just introduced the high cost of waste incineration in Japan. which is $350 for per ton of waste incineration. And in China, it's similar. The government needs to pay like $200 for per ton incineration. But in our country, we don't charge people who generate the waste, which means the government finance need to pay for the bill. It's not sustainable. And from another part, like the government didn't give any subsidy to the recycling system. So from my perspective, if the subsidy is balanced, the recycling industry can win more part from the market to recycle more plastic and metal and like paper. Anyways, yeah. So I think the subsidy system is also very important for us to learn. Yeah.
Coming back to the fly ash and bottom ash, right? We know that it's very toxic. For the proposed incinerator in Rawang, we were told by the government that the fly ash will be converted to cement. Now, how serious is this? Should we be worried about this? Should we be worried that the fly ash from the incinerator will be converted to
so
cement?
it's very dangerous. Yeah, it poses serious health concerns, I think. So in Japan, we are like strictly tracking all the fly ash, and if you cannot do that in like developing countries, especially, I think it's really dangerous to operate incinerators. You have to control fly ash as much as possible. So that's the precondition of having an incinerator, in my opinion.
Yes, and in China, after the plant to generate the flash need to chill it, carving into the solid and put it into the bag and then put them into the landfill. But there are some studies shows that after like 6 or 7 years, with the rain and the flash, some heavy metals and pollution in the flash will into the soil and into the water, like something. So there is no safe way for the flash right now. Far ago, yeah. Okay, that is not a positive, but it's the truth.
We have just a response from our next speaker, actually, Ms. Jane Bremer, about the human health impacts. It's in the chat, and I'll just read it very quickly. And she's saying here, please do read the case study by IPEN on Weekend China, where incineration impacts on human health were considerable. I also believe that Japan has some of the highest levels of dioxins in the human population in the world as a direct result of dioxin emissions from their numerous incinerators. Thank you, Jane. And one last Mr. Yushiro and Mr. Jiache. Now at this point, do we have time for a break or? 5-minute break? Okay. Okay, good. All right. I think we have one more giveaway?
Last one.
Okay, we have one more giveaway. And this is going to be an easy one. So can someone help me see who's raising their hands first? Okay. I don't even think I can read it fast enough. I know. True or false? Per unit of energy, coal-fired power plants emit more greenhouse gases than WTE.
False.
And the answer is false. Okay, so we'll have a 5-minute break, and we'll proceed with our finals panel. So right now it's 3:43. So we hope that before 3:50 people can come back, and then just have one final panel, just 4 panels. Australia and Europe.
Oh yeah.
Because he was in I want
stay here. You need help to pack up fast. Oh yeah.
Are you going to see what
you got walking distance only mah. Or like about to collect already. I think went up to fetch a later. You can pass.
Sering ada warga di sini.
Oh, is it? Oh yeah.
Tempat saya aja. Because he also shared with me the whole post very greenwashing. It's good lah, it's nice. So I find that he's not, he's okay lah, he can talk lah. Although his side of it, but I want to know we need to do our Malaysia he said that is still process because they are yeah, for I think that's what we're trying to decentralize. As soon as yeah, it is available for public use.
Yes.
Right.
But he says okay, address it practically.
No, it's not done yet.
But being done by people who can do it.
Third party. Yeah.
Not new untested, yeah, but they keep saying the people who have tested it don't want to be anymore.
Yeah.
So new untested is not a good word.
We need to wait for the DIA to publish, then we will the petition. Now petition only because DIA out, right? Is it what are they doing now? So I think they can raise the voice lah. Parent support, and it's like Tioman Airport that
Also, stage they identify the site, they identify the main hall.
they have, that's what they come up with. They're doing the DIA. Actually, the years already. No, not yet. He said the years already. There's 3 years. Long way long. Yeah, so it's like years. 1 year is too late.
To find out about the approval process.
You and Tasha. No. I always get teased by Jeffrey like, 你每次都很土 on the ground, the ground. Chocolate, 白色. What's your stuff? Like,
She wants to meet the founder of Zero Waste Malaysia.
No, only know Tasha. Oh, Tasha. Yeah. Oh, everything is through Tasha. That's why Tasha said, send me this, send me that, because some people want to know this.
It's like the volunteer group song.
She's sharing with the program. She was the one who was responsive. She asked me, who's the program?
People will ask.
People you ask her?
People will ask. Like, because like not a lot of people know where the event today.
It's true, because we only started organizing it in beginning of February. December. So it's only about 1.5 months. Today is 27. Only 1.5 months. Honestly, the whole thing between just me and Marcus.
So many speakers, even though online, because the program is
Consider very good, very good. Just me and Marcus.
well done.
Yeah. And also the hybrid format allows you interact and you feel like you're listening to the incidents. And then initially we started sitting 50, then 100. But we were registering more than that. But then we Malaysian culture, sometimes they register to have. But I think that means like I thought we are really bringing something like bigger, like science makes a really huge
What issue probably is that people who are here are generally already converted. You know what I mean? Yeah, they're already anti.
Already advocate.
Already activists.
Yeah, the community members. Yeah, they might be already watchers, but they might not know the details.
So the details ultimately depend on do more public outreach, influence public opinion more.
That's why this time we do Raya event, they might be big event, but small event.
Organizing a trip to Batu Arang, right?
Yes.
They're all very excited.
Who are very excited?
Rex told me.
Yes, they're all very excited.
I hope it's not a secret because they mentioned it. Oh, it's very close.
Can I tell you something? You also
No, we have. I already booked the 500 ringgit for coach
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start the next session now because we have our friends waiting online. Yeah? Oh, all right. Hope you had your short break. We have less people now, but we have a few more people online, still online. I would like to introduce our first speaker. We have from Australia and Zero Waste Europe. Yeah. I would like to introduce Ms. Jane Brammer. I have known her for many years now. We are part of the Global Alliance for Incineration Alternatives and also IPAN, International Pollutants Elimination Network. Okay, Ms. Jane Brammer is based in Western Australia and has worked for environmental health and justice for more than 20 years. She currently leads the Zero Waste Australia campaign. Jane works collaboratively with local, state, national and also international NGOs, experts and researchers to resist incinerators and establish zero waste city models. Yeah? She is also, her organization is a core member of the Break Free from Plastic movement, and they have been a long-term member of Global Alliance for Incineration Alternatives. Jane works to address the systemic failures of global waste and plastic pollution, and Jane also coordinates the Western Australia local environmental health and justice groups working on the in terms of protection of the environment, air quality, and also resisting toxic waste management, pesticides, and contaminated sites. Yeah. So the protection of children's health, especially, is Jane's key motivation, and she has received award for her work from the Sunday Times Pride of Australia Model for Environmental Activism in 2007. Yeah, she's one person who has inspired a lot of our work. Yeah, and her husband, her partner, Mr. Lee Bell, is also a scientist who works with the International Pollutants Elimination Network. All right, so we would like to invite Jane to present her views in terms of and also her fight of waste-to-energy incinerators.
Just going to check, am I sharing the screen here? Yes. Just a bit of technical assistance would be good. Am I sharing my screen here? Yeah, you can share your screen.
这里 we cannot see you. Okay.
Hey, I think I'm organised here now. Thank you for your patience. Well, I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Wajak Noongar people, so I'd like to start by paying my respects to the elders past and present, particularly on this weekend, which is an Australia Day to some people, but a survival day to many of the Indigenous people in my country, and I'd like to pay my respects to them and acknowledge that their land was never ceded. As I said, I'm based in Western Australia. I coordinate an organisation, Toxic Free Australia, and run their Zero Waste Australia campaign. We are a campaign that is really focused on preventing the wide-scale introduction of incineration into Australia, and already Western Australia has approved 2 projects. But before we can talk about the impact of incineration, we have to really understand it, and I understand that I'm talking to the converted, and many people in the room understand just what waste represents. It really is a reflection back to us about our entire materials production. And I want to start my presentation by making that statement to underscore just how important the issue of waste is for climate justice, for environmental justice, for human rights, for communities all over the world. How we live, grow our food, make all of our materials and products that we live with come to the end of life, and how we deal with that comes with huge impact. So we really need to understand the importance of waste management in our world to really understand why waste incineration is such a bad option. The questions that I asked to present to you today asked the question about what were the drivers in Western Australia for introducing incinerators. And I have to say that before I get to that in more detail, I really have to acknowledge the incredible documentary by Debunking, Plastic China, which really woke the world up to the global plastic export problem and waste colonialism pretty much around the world, and really really motivated the rest of the Asia-Pacific region to also close their door on the dumping of plastic waste in China and the Asia-Pacific region. So in response, my Prime Minister announced a global first, a waste export ban. It was highly regarded. It was a huge announcement, but it was a problematic announcement because Australia didn't have a policy and a regulatory framework infrastructure to deal with the fact that we would no longer export our waste, while we also were passing policies, national policies, for zero waste to landfill. So we closed the door on landfill, we closed the door on exporting waste, and what that left was the perfect grounds for the waste to energy incineration to come into Australia. And as you can see, many of the policies that Australia set really indicated that that was the direction that the Australian government was taking, that they were going to burn most of our plastic waste. And it's been highlighted in a number of policies, some of which are here. This is the plastic waste export rules that Australia implemented, which really was quite groundbreaking, but as I said, problematic in that Australia will only be allowed to export plastic waste that's a single polymer or a process engineered fuel. I'm sad to report, though, that just recently the Australian government reversed that decision and reopened the export of some plastic waste. And this was after a change of government and as a result of the lack of recycling infrastructure and investment in what is essentially basic and important zero waste strategies, how we collect our waste, how we source, separate it, and how we're going to recycle it. Australia didn't put money or attention into those areas, so we've ended up with a very policy framework in Australia that is really designed around burning waste in all of its many guises. And in Australia, that's very much so as you saw in the waste export ban legislation, is going to be process engineered fuel, which comes under many names, but we know that it all includes plastic for the high calorific value that incinerators require. So in Australia, most of our waste policies are directed towards three main outcomes, and that is very much so incineration, production and manufacture of refuse-derived fuel and its use, which is going to cement kilns, incinerators, pulp mills, any industry basically that combusts a fuel for energy. And more recently, a very big focus on chemical recycling, which, as we know, is dominated very much by two technologies, pyrolysis and gasification, which the EU and the US classify as incinerator technologies where they're not used, where the fuel and crude oil that these technologies create isn't used to make the petrochemical feedstock for new plastics. And research around the world has shown that these technologies are really not delivering new plastic outcomes, but are really being used as a way to burn plastic as fuel. Australia really early on embraced the idea of waste to energy incineration and even gave huge amounts of clean energy and renewable energy money and funds to the industry. $7.8 billion investment was made, and in the narrative in our government agencies, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and the Australian Renewable Energy Authority, really promoted this direction that Australia is taking, specifically to the Asia Pacific region. And there's a reason for that. And as you can see, this is some of the narratives in the Australian literature that introduced waste energy incineration into Australia, very heavily going to be promoting that in the Asia Pacific region. And as you can see here, our government has partnered with academia and the Asia Pacific Waste Consultants, in this case the University of Technology Sydney, following the waste export ban, to look at and investigate an environmentally friendly way to continue the plastic waste trade. So part of that includes, when you read these reports and dig into them, is technology and aid support for the Asia Pacific region, and no surprise there is that pyrolysis and gasification technologies and incineration technologies are being recommended by Australia to the many Asia Pacific countries. Why is this a problem? Well, incineration as a concept is a failure. Let's not beat around the bush. It is a huge failure, and the failure of incineration is recognised in a number of international conventions, and I'm going to highlight three here: the Stockholm Convention, the Minamata Convention, and the Paris Convention. The Stockholm Convention does identify waste incineration as a major source of unintentional costs. And let's not forget that dioxin emissions, one of the main persistent organic pollutants that come from incinerators, doesn't just come out of the stack through the burning of waste, but it's actually formed outside of the stack as the gases cool down. So say that the waste incineration industry, and I'm sure our friends in Zero Waste Europe will explain this a bit more, that waste incineration industries can operate without generating persistent organic pollutants safely is really misinformation. And the objective of the Stockholm Convention is to protect human health and the environment from POPs. And Australia is signatory to this convention. So rolling out a new incineration industry in Australia really is contrary to the Stockholm Convention and our obligations under the Stockholm. The Minamata Convention, which focuses on the generation of mercury pollution, Australia is also signatory to the Minamata Convention. The Minamata Convention identifies waste incineration as one of the top 5 industrial sources of mercury emissions. And so again, Australia is obliged to reconsider introducing this industry, given that mercury pollution is a key pollutant on incinerators, and we should, as we are obliged under this convention, not pursue those technologies. And thirdly, the Basel Convention, which aims to protect human health and the environment from the adverse effects resulting from the generation, management, transboundary movements and disposal of hazardous waste. And this convention identifies that the incineration of waste generates hazardous waste. So again, these are 3 conventions that Australia is signatory to and obliges our country not to pursue waste incineration. You might want to look at your own country and see whether they're signatories to this convention, and maybe encourage your governments to abide by the obligation of being signatories to this convention. Incineration, of course, comes with pollution. There's no getting around that, and there are a whole range of serious pollutants that I'm sure have already been covered for you. These are some of them, but what is less talked about is the nanoparticles that are emitted from incinerators. There's no regulatory framework for nanoparticles. We know incinerators emit nanoparticles, and we know that nanoparticles emitted from incinerators can have the same profile as the pollution that is measured, that includes neurotoxic and PCBs and other measures. We also know that nanoparticles are a serious human health threat because we don't have evolution control systems to capture them effectively. They're transboundary pollutants. They travel all around the world, depositing in the polar ice and the marine environment. And they penetrate deep into the organs of the human body. Our normal defence mechanisms cannot protect us from nanoparticles. They can penetrate deep into our organs. Incinerators also pose significant risk, particularly to children, and we really don't give that near enough attention that it deserves, and that's because children do not process pollution like adults do. Their developing windows of development can be seriously impacted. They inhale, ingest and absorb more pollution than adults. They don't have developed toxic elimination processes. Their body burdens are increasing, and we all know how children are now being born with chemicals and plastics at birth, you know. So we really need to get a grip on the pollution, the increasing pollution that we have globally, and incinerators are a major driver of that. Ash has been talked about a lot. Another key issue that we focus on in Australia in our campaign is what's to do with the ash. The ash is not an insignificant amount, and we're turning it into a quarter of that volume as ash. And there's no safe place to go. I mean, the irony of saying that incinerators are going to replace landfills is just delusional. In fact, what we're doing is we're creating hazardous waste from our municipal solid waste, and we're having to put that in hazardous waste cells. That increases the risk for workers, increases risk to the environment and to those communities. And it's a serious public health issue that's been well documented. And the ash, I have to say, even in Europe, is not well managed. We know that increasing evidence is coming forward about the PFAS that incinerators produce not only in the ash, but now there's evidence that it's coming out of the stack too. And we also know that incinerators don't eliminate microplastics. In fact, there are sources of microplastics. In Australia, we focus very much on the health impacts of incineration, and the Public Health Association of Australia did a systematic review of all the global health studies on incineration and made some very damning claims. And we rely on that a lot because the health impacts of waste incinerators can be long-term and irreversible. But one thing I do want to highlight is that part of our campaign has been very much so to expose how our scientific and health professionals report on the issue and how that compares to what the industry actually says themselves. And the Public Health Association of Australia concluded that there really is insufficient evidence to conclude that any incinerator is safe. Yet you have the head of Hitachi Zosen, one of the biggest incinerator companies in Australia, on many, many occasions, reporting and stating to the public and our regulators that incinerators just have a little bit of clean flue gas, inert salt, dust, is a bit of inert dust, harmless soluble salt, when they're not talking about the real white organic fluids, acid gases, and all those things that harm. They really are misleading the public, and it's really important to expose that. Similarly, Veolia, big incinerator company, pushing heavily into Australia with numerous projects, and they just want to convince us that they've got the science and the evidence that there aren't any problematic air emissions or any impact on their soil. And yet, we have the Australian Public Health Association stating that incinerators should not be built anywhere near where food is produced. I'm sure our colleagues in Europe will talk more about that and the recent evidence that's coming from Europe about the dioxin impacts in the surrounding soils around the incinerators, particularly in France, and the millions of people that have now been advised not to eat their backyard eggs. Incinerators don't just emit pollution and cause health impacts, they are risky. And the organisation in the Czech documented well the number of explosions and fires that happen in these incinerator facilities. And we know this well in Australia because after the waste export ban and the collapse of our soft plastic packaging, we've had at least 9 massive plastic waste fires in Western Australia. You know, incinerators and stockpiles of waste and the technology used to burn them pose significant fire and explosion that must be considered. And as we know, it's the most expensive way to make energy and the most polluting way to manage our waste. We commissioned a report in Australia to look at what were the best options for our residual waste, and our consultants concluded that landfills with full pre-treatment, and when I say full pre-treatment, we're talking about full, proper zero waste systems, where we invest in how we collect and sort the waste, making sure all the organics are removed and don't go to burning, stabilising anything that goes to landfill. And the outcomes in terms of our air quality, climate impact, health costs, demonstrate that landfills with full pre-treatment outcompete all ranges of waste incineration. And after having said all of that, I can confirm that there is no community that welcomes incineration. And this is not just a NIMBY issue as it's constantly put forward, but it is a global issue because the pollution that incinerators emit don't stay behind the factory fence line, they don't stay in that country, they travel, they transboundary and they travel around the world, and as I said, they deposit in the marine environment and the polar ice caps and go on to continue to pose human health threats. But I can assure you in Australia, every single community is resisting hard, and we're working very hard in Australia to reject this industry with some success, and there have been no incinerators approved or built in the east coast of Australia as a result of our work. So my message to you, I'm so sorry, is that all environmental justice campaigns require political scientific. A tip for you is to start your campaign early. Normally when a project is committed to a government environmental impact assessment process, it's very difficult to get a rejection of that project. So the greatest impact you can have is before it gets lost in an environmental impact assessment process. So it means following government policy and engaging early to counter any promotional narratives and to really make it clear that you are attempting to stop the project before it gets into the system. It's also trying to support your frontline communities as a priority because they're the communities that are going to carry the greatest environmental justice burden. And this is very likely to include local governments because the incineration industry and their lobbyists target local governments because that's where they need to get their first permissions. And they need to prove, well in Australia especially, they have to prove that they have a social licence to operate. So a focus on local government is really, really important. Then find your allies and supporters in academia, in politics, in the non-government organisation sector, both locally and internationally, in government and in the media, and work with them to support your campaign early on. Educating the communities and the decision makers and the media about full health, environment and social impacts of incineration is really important because as I've shown, industry will deliberately mislead your regulators, the community and the government about their impact. So it's really important to provide a counter narrative and to educate your communities and your decision makers with the truth. highlight the cross-sector nature of waste management, as I said in my first slide, with the climate justice, social and environmental justice and the human rights of Indigenous people. When we pollute the marine environment, we are denying Indigenous peoples their right to live off the marine food chain, to fish, to have access to their lands, which is their cultural and ecological heritage too. So pollution is colonialism, basically, and we have to remember that all the time, that these are environmental justice threats. Exposing misinformation campaigns by the industry and their lobbyists, as I said, is really important, because we need to demonstrate to the decision makers all the time the industry is deliberately misleading and playing down their adverse impact because they want to get a foot in the door, and the government don't always provide balance, and the media doesn't always provide balance. So it's really important to keep that firmly in the mind and expose misinformation campaigns all the time. We're living in the social media era, and utilising social media, especially platforms for young people, is going to be increasingly important. Highlight the proven alternatives, and the Asia Pacific really have the goods on a successful zero waste model. So Gaia and our friends there have everything that you need to know about how to implement sustainable zero waste policies and what the solutions are. Also, have fun and be creative, because it can be a very depressing campaign to be constantly in the place of fighting polluters. And you have to remember that you're just doing your best, and have a bit of fun and be creative, and we're all here to support you. Zero Waste Europe can demonstrate numerous zero waste city models that are currently operating, because as we know, one of the main narratives of the incineration industry is, well, we abide by the best and safest EU standards, and yet we know that those standards aren't as effective as they claim, and that communities and the environment are being harmed by incinerators who are working to those standards in Europe. And the work of Zero Waste Europe and Toxico Watch, especially in documenting the persistent organic pollution around incinerators that are operating at best practice EU standards and even beyond, really demonstrates that that's another false narrative. So that's all from there. I've probably gone way over time, so thank you to the organisers, and thank you for giving me time to share my thoughts.
Thank you, Jane. Hope you'll be staying online. We will have a question and answer session later on. Is Yanek online? Yes. All right. Now I'd like to introduce the next speaker, Yanek Walsh. He leads the Zero Waste Europe work on end of waste treatment, focusing on sustainable management of mixed waste. Previously, he worked for Friends of the Earth Europe in Brussels, where he coordinated fundraising efforts on behalf of Friends of the Earth Europe and its 6 programs. Prior to FOEE, Yanek worked for the Justice and Environment, where he provided leadership for the development of strategic partnerships. I met Yanek a few days ago online during our Global Methane Hub meeting. So nice to meet you again, Yanek. Please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So you can see the slides?
We can see the slides, yes. Yeah.
In a right way? Okay, so yes, so thank you first of all for the invitation. Wait, it seems like it's doing, okay. And sorry, it seems like the video doesn't work with the sharing app. I don't know what's happening, it just turned off. Anyhow, so thank you again for the invitation, and good morning from Brussels. So I'm very happy to speak about how the situation is currently in Europe and to give you sort of a European perspective to the issue. Before I start, I just wanted to just say a couple of words about who I am. So my name is Janek Värk. I work for Zero Waste Europe for the last 8 years now. And Zero Waste Europe is an umbrella organization bringing groups together from Europe, going beyond the European Union countries. And we also European chapter of Gaia and co-founder of Break Free from Plastics and Breaking Plastics. And when it comes to me specifically, then my focus is really on managing of the kind of waste which is left after the separate collections. So let's say this is the kind of the most problematic waste. I wanted to talk to you today about a couple of things. First of all, how is the kind of policy situation in Europe? In particular, the financing part, because obviously incinerators are very, very expensive and they normally require a lot of funds. I'm going to also look at other policies and particularly what is coming up now. And then I will talk just a little bit about, so what does the recent science say about waste incineration, and particularly looking at some of the very, very recent data coming out over the last 3 years, let's say so. Okay, so let's say when it comes to European policy, really the things started to change around 2015 when we launched our so-called first Circular Economy Action Plan. And right after that, we had a communication from European Commission on the role of waste to energy in a circular economy. And that was a key moment in terms of policy and how waste incineration was seen in Europe. And it was a change in a former position of the Commissioner, which has been until recently actively promoted waste incineration. And so the change now, what happened is that the Commission has started to acknowledge the problems of waste incineration, particularly related to our capacities, but also distortion in terms of economic incentives and some of the risks of just focusing on minimizing landfilling in Europe. Because even now, today, the problem with the waste policy is that we are too much focused just on minimizing landfilling, while the waste incineration sort of got away. So that was a big change, and there were some very concrete recommendations in there. So one of them was to focus on separate collection and creating a recycling infrastructure, particularly in the countries where that were doing not very well in terms of collections. It also recommended to focus on collection of bio-waste and using it for anaerobic treatment rather than dumping it into waste incinerators. And it gave some very specific recommendations for countries with heavy waste incineration capacities, such as putting strong taxes, increasing taxes, and if they didn't have taxes, introducing taxes, calling for a moratorium on particularly on newer capacities and phasing out some of the older facilities. So that was really the start of the change in Europe. And I think it's important to talk about it because indeed, as Jane and many others have mentioned before, is that often when we talk about the European policy and the situation in Europe, it's taken out of context. And it's important to know how the situation is right now. So as a follow-up to that communication, the Commission has really, let's say, it has kept its word. And when the budget discussion started in in 2017, basically the Commission recommended phasing out all the funds for waste incineration, but obviously, as you might know, the situation in Europe is that it's not the Commission who decides on things. This Commission's role is to propose new legislation, but then it's the Member States and the European Parliament who negotiate the final proposal. So that, fortunately, the negotiations went very well. So all the big funds in Europe, such as Regional Development Fund and Cohesion Fund, Regional Development Fund and Cohesion Fund, it's a fund that is helping particularly the Member States who are, let's say, less economically developed, to support them to catch up with other countries. Also, Just Transition Fund. Just Transition Fund was created to help to move away from coal. And also Recovery and Resilience Fund. It's a big fund that was created to help European economies in the COVID situation. So these funds we are talking about, for example, Recovery and Resilience Fund, it's about 800 billion euro fund. The other funds are also quite big, and all these funds, they basically explicitly call for no funding for waste incineration. Just wanted to, I also have a link for my statement, so if anybody wants to follow up, please see them below. So I just wanted to give you a specific example of this so-called COVID fund, and they made it's a Commission guidance for the use of funds, and they made actually investment in waste incineration as an example of non-compliance with so-called do no significant harm criteria. Basically, it forbid using those funds for building incinerators. So that's quite important, because we are really talking about the total moratorium in terms of finance in investment in waste incinerators. And as a follow-up, the Commission, since a couple of years, it started, if I'm not wrong, in 2018-19, has been also developing criteria for guiding or giving recommendations for what kind of finance would be considered as sustainable. So they have been working on different so-called taxonomies. So taxonomies on what would be considered as a sustainable activity. And the first taxonomy to be published, or that was published, was focusing on the climate change mitigation and adaptation. And this taxonomy excluded waste incineration. And more recently, last year, there was also the taxonomy developed for activities that can substantially contribute towards circular economy. And that taxonomy also excluded waste incineration on the grounds that investment in waste incineration undermine better waste management. So this is so you can see that most of the policy change has been mainly related to financing and giving guidance on what could be considered as sustainable, and that's been a relatively recent. So what is still missing is a policy change in terms of waste policies and climate policies, but there are some exciting things coming up. Something very concrete to mention is we had a European emission trading scheme reviewed, that was last year, finally adopted. So what it does is it actually includes activities that are a significant source of greenhouse gases, and after long negotiations, they agreed that the Commission should also address the issue of waste incineration and come up with a study on how to integrate waste incinerators in the emission trading scheme by 2026, and then they will be finally included from 2028. So this is still to happen, but this will have a significant impact on waste incineration in Europe, because it will make it extremely expensive and be a big driver to move away from that. We are talking about roughly 80 euros per ton of greenhouse gases, or CO2 actually, emitted, so it's a significant financial burden. And we have also calculated what it cost. It would cost roughly somewhere between 7 million tons of euros per facility, on average facility in Europe. So it will really be a big driver to move away from waste incineration. Something else that is going to happen is also the revision of the Waste Framework Directive. And we have a current revision which is limited on so-called limited revision, which focuses mainly on the textiles and food waste, very important topics. But the broader revision of the Waste Framework Directive is still to happen, and it should happen somewhere around 2026. And there, the discussion will be really mainly about moving away from limiting landfilling towards limiting the generation of residual waste, or mixed waste, as we like to call it here in Zero Waste Europe, in order to sort of like start limiting any kind of disposal. And we are also hoping that the whole discussion on the considering waste incineration as a source of energy will be removed. So the so-called R1 criterion, considering incinerators as source of energy and therefore giving it sort of like more advantageous position in the waste hierarchy, should be removed. And the whole waste hierarchy should be also removed. I mean, not removed, sorry. It should be reviewed. Yeah, just maybe also in this context, something very recent that I have been involved is so-called revision of the Industrial Emissions Directive, and where also the emissions from waste incinerators were discussed. And because this is important for the discussion of how safe are the incinerators. And so the rules actually were also reviewed, and one of the issues that will change now is the issue of how emissions are measured. And so far, and I think this is a valid point for, when the industry often says about the emissions from incinerators, is that currently what they measure when it comes to dioxins and furans, they only measure it twice a year for just a few hours. So obviously that doesn't represent any kind of data on the actual emissions. And that has been a really big issue, and it still is an issue. And most importantly, also the monitoring of emissions during so-called other than normal operating situations until today are not required. So meaning that whenever you have shutdowns, you are starting up, you have accidents, you're not allowed to, you're not supposed to do monitoring of persistent organic pollutants, meaning that the moments when you actually emit most of the emissions, and these are not really happening just very seldom, they are really regular part of engineering operations. These moments, they actually emit most of the emissions. So it's very important that these are also to be measured. So this is going to be now changed. So they will also have to start measuring those emissions. I think Jane already said a lot about the science of what we know about in terms of the emissions and so on. I must say that in Europe, until very recently, our focus was really on the kind of mostly like the lock-in effect of waste incinerators, because it was very difficult to access the data on pollution. and there was no affordable tool, and getting the data from incinerator itself, it's very difficult. You can only do it if you put a lot of political pressure on and then access data, and then you need to have experts who are actually able to analyze the data. So it's a very complex. So until recently, we couldn't really, challenge or the so-called claims of waste incinerators being a problem. But since about last 3 years, we have started to do biomonitoring. So basically analyzing the emissions around incinerators and also analyzing the stack emissions in order to compare the data. And what the science shows is that it doesn't matter how old or new the facility is, in all the cases there is a clear increase in emissions from waste incinerators. So in terms of consistent organic pollutants. And we have been analyzing mostly backyard chicken eggs, so those are chickens who are free range, they can move around and eat what is outside. And also some vegetation, like pine needles and mosses. These are really suitable for analyzing this kind of pollution. In all cases, we have found a significantly higher level of pollution around the incinerators. And I just put 2 examples here, because there are actually currently 2 big scandals in Europe. One in Paris, where as a result of our study with toxicologists who are providing the toxicology expertise, we found high level of pollution in chicken eggs that were actually sold for consumption. And as a result, the local authority conducted their own study, and they found the problem was actually much bigger. And they immediately banned the consumption of those eggs. But what is important here is this is not an indication of there is a problem with chicken eggs. Actually, it means really that whatever grows around and lives around incinerators is a problem now. So this is a big scandal at the moment happening in and France is the place where we have the most incinerators in Europe. We have 150, 120 between incinerators. So it could be that the problem is much bigger, and some of the politicians have asked for similar studies around other facilities. And something similar happened here in Belgium, where I am based. Very recently, we published a study, again toxicologists, analyzing emissions around the most recent facility in Beringen. It's just really started operations about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. And so toxicologists analyzed the baseline situation, and then after the year 1 and year 2, the data on to see the change, and they found again high levels of dioxin purines, and most importantly also PFAS. And this has become a huge scandal here. And I can tell you that the authorities are very, very worried about the situation, because they are relying on incineration as the source of getting rid of so-called mixed waste. They have really banned landfilling here, and now they are, they don't know what to do, and they were very worried about publishing this study because it was commissioned actually by the local authorities. And there have been several meetings with the ministry, and the ministry has just commissioned a study to doing a blood analysis on the population living around the incinerators to see how big of the problem is. So this is just an example. I can just tell you that we are very soon going to publish also more evidence on, and we are going to look now into more the food crops grown around incinerators, such as grapes, apples, but also even looking into the breast milk, so the mother's milk. And so the studies will be published very soon. I can already tell you that there is no good news in there. So something very shortly about a couple of other issues, and this is really important in terms of guiding your decisions on what's the right thing to do, because waste incineration really came to play as a source of to replace landfills, and so we've been also looking into the residual issues from incinerators, what happens to them and how much is generated, and also the kind of energy efficiency claims of incinerators, particularly in the context of Europe, we have this energy crisis because of the war with Russia, and we just saw that actually incinerators, they generate millions of tons of biomass. So municipal incinerators, they generate 12 million tons of biomass and around 2 million tons of air pollution control residues, which are extremely toxic. And there's a big problem of that this out of this is really landfill. In some cases, they try to use them. I do not recommend using them because it's very difficult to stabilize these kind of residues. They are full of dioxins and other resistant pollutants. And so yeah, it's a real problem here. So they don't really replace landfills. What they do is that they maybe reduce the amount, but they create a bigger problem, which is the toxic residues, which needs to be very deposited in a very safe place in some places. So sometimes they try to put them in the mines, but mines are not created to deposit things. You mine where you want minerals or you want your salt, but they are not really safe for depositing this kind of toxic residues. So it's a real problem, and this study was really kind of groundbreaking in terms of making clear that it's a huge issue. And just the last thing I wanted to mention is on the energy efficiencies, because we had this energy crisis, and also in many other regions, they are promoted as a large source of energy, and we found that actually the energy efficiency of incinerators are very, very low. They are just around mid-20%. So they're very, very inefficient. They produce very little energy in the first place. And so why I wanted to mention that is that there's no really ground for and there's no really study which says that incinerators in any case better than landfills. It's in fact the other way around, and they are quite a big climate problem. So just to conclude, right now in the EU we have a financial moratorium on incinerators, so no EU money should go into incineration, and instead, in fact, there will be a new cost put on incinerators in the future in order to really try to phase out. When it comes to other EU policies, there are big discussions coming up to move away from limiting landfills to limiting residual waste, including incineration. Hopefully, even decommissioning them very soon. And we hope also that there will be a review of the waste hierarchy and the landfill target, which currently is a big reason why so much incinerators were built, and the focus will be redirecting towards the upper parts of the waste hierarchy, particularly the reuse and recycling. And then when it comes to recent research, as I said, there is really no evidence. The most recent research really shows that even the modern state-of-art incinerators, they are not safe. And I'm really talking about facilities that have just gone online maybe in the last 1, 2, 3 years, and there's no evidence that they are safe. And as I said, they do generate lots of toxic residues that still have to be landfilled. So they do not provide a solution. So I'll stop here. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yannick and Jane. Both of them have shared a lot of reference documents here. For for Europe, you can also check out zerowasteeurope.eu, the website, and also IPEN, International Pollutants Elimination Network's website. There's a lot of evidence that shows, and he had also in his last slide says, European incinerators are far from being safe. So because the Malaysian government says, just now you heard our YB for Selayang, the MP for Selayang says, oh, the government says incinerators are safe, but it's far from safe. Yeah, we have evidence from Australia and also Europe showing that it's far from safe. So I'd like to open the floor for questions. Anybody here? Hi, Kui. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, my name is Pui. I'm with individual. I just came, so I might have missed some questions earlier, but I wanted to ask, and there might be a similar question earlier. So whenever we tell governments or businesses about the harmful health impact of their practices, for example, like plastic credits or incineration, they like to ask us for solutions. They're finding better solutions themselves. So someone was defending an incinerator, and I was also thinking how to respond to his defense. So he said that the landfills are at capacity. They're going to be full in the next 2 to 5 years. There's no more land for landfilling. How can you solve this waste problem immediately, quickly, without relying on behavioral change would take forever? And he said that the incinerator, blah, 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 technology now is very good. They will ensure that it's safe. They will make sure that the technology is from a proven technology provider, and that the incinerator has a time span. So it's only for a limited amount of time. In the meantime, they will work on better waste management practices. So this is this person's defense of the incinerator. To any of the speakers, how would you respond to that? Thank you.
Did you hear that? Jane, can you hear that? Jane,
yes, maybe. Yes, I mean, if I may, I mean, it's clear that the focus has to be, of course, on zero waste solutions. So separate collection has to become a priority. In the meanwhile, we also have a recommendation in terms of like how to deal with this kind of waste in between the situation. So we actually have created our transition strategy, which is not relying on combustion. So what we recommend in the meanwhile is to have a system, something called material recovery and biological treatment. Basically what it does, it says like, focus on separate collection as much as possible, make sure that this is the right thing to do, and then of course on the prevention. But for the left, which is not separate collected, so what you can do is sort out the things that still end up in there. So there's a lot of materials in there that can be sorted out very easily. There are new technologies that are sorting out anything from plastic, metals, paper, cardboard, or there also, it can be also done mechanically. And then the biological part, stabilize it biologically. Don't rely on incineration. This way you avoid combustion, and you can still reduce significantly the amount of waste which ends up in this kind of waste stream. So we have actually done recently a study, we published it last year. So overall, this kind of system, it can reduce by half. It really depends on the waste composition, because I think it's particularly relevant for example, for Asia, where you produce a lot of food waste. Biological stabilization should be the norm. In Europe, we have mandatory separate collection for bio-waste. Obviously, much less organic waste ends up in there, which makes actually the recyclable parts more recoverable in the sense of sorting out. So that's what we are focusing on. And what is interesting is that there are there's a lot of this happening actually in Europe. But we are struggling with the old narrative that incineration is still kind of like a solution. So we're still struggling with that, and the change is too slow. But so my big advice is learn from our mistakes. Don't do the same mistakes. And so we will focus on doing the right thing, and most importantly, this kind of system. This is what I mentioned, MRPT. It gives the flexibility, and it's cheap. It's so much cheaper. It's just a fraction of the cost that you need for building an incinerator, and then you're stuck with it, and it would not allow you to get any better waste management. So I hope it's clear.
Thank you, Yannick. Jane, would you like to share?
So, first question for you. Thanks for thoughtful this question. Let's not change anything and let's just say, what are we going to do with the waste? First thing you do is you don't put organic waste in landfill. And because that's the problem with landfill, is it generates methane, and methane is really potent greenhouse gas. So it's a really simple start to a zero waste system is to ensure you don't put organic waste in the residual waste stream or to landfill. In the Asia Pacific region, that's a really easy change with huge benefits. I believe that most countries should be able to get their residual waste volume down to at least about 10%. And what we're asking is for our decision makers to invest in how you collect and source separate waste, rather than constantly focusing and investing in disposal. And one of the things to watch out for is when the governments, and especially local governments, take their advice, they're taking advice from the waste disposal sector. Go and speak, tell them to go and speak to the zero waste experts, the sustainability experts, the people that have the experience, because there are very simple, cost-effective ways. As our report showed in Australia, we asked that very question, what is the best way to manage our residual waste? And the outcome was very clearly not incineration. It was landfill with pre-treatment. And pre-treatment means taking out all of the organics, making sure everything that's recyclable and reusable is removed. And what you have left, and there's a big problem in the Asia Pacific region, is soft plastic packaging and sachets. And really the focus needs to be on the government to deal with that problem, because that's the problem that's going to feed the incinerators and justify what they're going to use to justify incinerators. And it really is a design failure. So what about extended producer responsibility for that plastic packaging instead of local governments and consumers carrying the burden of this problem? If we had proper extended producer responsibility laws, then those problematic wastes that end up in the waste stream, in the residual waste stream, would be the responsibility of the industries that create them instead of the government and the people who are left carrying the baby, I guess, at the end because they're refusing to redesign. So we really need to flip the narrative back to the people who are producing the products that are in the residual waste stream. And how about looking at what's in that residual waste stream, having a dedicated residual waste research centre that looks at what's in the residual waste stream and works out how to deal with it better. And they'll find sanitary products, disposable nappies and soft plastic packaging. And they're really three big areas that can be resolved. And as Yannick says, MRBT is the solution. But there are new technologies coming on the market, non-combustible. But we don't need that just yet. We just really need the focus to be on reducing the residual waste volume rather than asking what can we do with that residual waste.
Okay, thank you. We have 4 questions online. It can be short answers, yeah? Yannick, question for you. Please share how much are the costs of studies, yeah, for dioxin levels, and who funds this work?
Yeah, just very quickly. Yeah, our funding for this kind of work is coming from private foundations, and I think I would say like the main cost is not actually the analysis. They are relatively cheap. It can be just done for I think for like one analysis can cost maybe around 200 euros. but you do see because you're doing several samples, so in the end it will be thousands of euros, but the main cost is really the person cost. So yeah, that's it sort of.
Okay, and
you know, what is important is just to explain why it's that it's conducted in a scientific way, because you know, you don't just go and sample you need to make sure that you do it in a scientific way, and you need to analyze it. So this kind of preparation work is more expensive, because you need to have an expert with that. But otherwise, the analytical analysis cost itself is not that expensive.
So there's also another question on RDF, refuse derived fuel. Is it an alternative treatment to residual waste? Any issues with RDF power plants or incinerators? IPAN had carried a lot of analysis on this. There are studies on this. You can also check out the IPAN website. We have studies from Malaysia too, Malaysia, Australia, Indonesia. So we will not go into that because there are a few other questions. So for biological treatment, can you suggest for any funding? A lot of questions on funds here. Can we obtain to conduct a study on the viability of this in Malaysia? So for biological treatment.
Biological treatment? You mean funding for biological treatment? It's like to do a study. Yeah, well, I mean, it's difficult to pinpoint now. Because you know, often the funders, they have a regional priorities. I'm sure there are quite a number of foundations and maybe even hopefully some of the international finances. And I cannot just pinpoint like one specific one. Always happy to later maybe to send some references to if you're interested. But here, I mean, I mean, in terms of like, as I said, like we have already done studies in Europe on the costs, and it's cheap. You can look at some of the studies that we have done and published just last year in terms of cost of biological treatment, and also the sorting part. The sorting part is slightly more expensive. Biological treatment actually is not expensive, and it's done very extensively in Europe because we have a pre-treatment requirement before landfilling.
Probably I would like to share in terms of biological treatment. Malaysia's waste, Southeast Asia's waste is mostly organic waste. Yeah, you don't have to go high tech. Just do composting. Yeah, at household level, at local community level. Yes, so that's what we have been promoting. And Gaia has a lot of information on how to do composting. And if you want to learn from Malaysia, go to CAP. Yeah, we have many types of composting where we have learned from Gaia's members too. Yeah, last question, maybe I'll just pass it on to Jane. What is the alternative solution from incinerators being adopted in Australia? I remember like from 2000 itself, yeah, from the year 2000, we have always been listening to Zero Waste Australia, remember? Yeah, so what has happened to Zero Waste Australia? And can you please explain, Jane?
Well, Zero Waste Australia is still here. That's our organisation. And we commissioned an investigation into the best options for residual waste in Australia. And Eunomia Consulting looked at all of our policies and our data and concluded that incineration was the worst solution in terms of cost on our climate, on air pollution, and on public health. So they said, concluded that when they compared incineration to a range of other residual waste disposal technologies, landfill with full pre-treatment was the best option. Because let's not forget, that when people say, oh, but landfill's bad, there's this assumption that that we're just putting organic waste in there. That's the problem with landfill, is putting organic waste. So if you, in places like the Asia Pacific, that's the bulk of your waste stream. So if you take out the organic waste, you're really reducing the amount of waste that's left. And then you're really forced to look at what that is, which is soft plastic sachets and things like that, that really are the responsibility of the producers. So let's send it back to the producers. resolve that waste problem and not leave it with local governments and the public. But we recommend MRBT as the best option at the moment for residual waste, where we don't have a very good waste management system in Australia. We don't have public place recycling bins or composting bins. There are many entire towns and areas that have no waste management service. And this is what makes the issue so problematic for us. Our government is rushing to invest billions and billions of renewable energy funds and clean energy funds, public funds, into incinerators, but we don't have basic waste management services for our citizens. Our message is invest in collection and source separation. Get that right, because you're 50% of the way there if you collect your waste effectively and separate it effectively. And that means more than just a big materials recovery facility. We have the waste disposal industry like Cleanaway, Veolia, sewers, collecting waste, and they've designed our waste systems for disposal. That's why we don't have public place recycling and composting bins. That's why we have companies that just come round with the dump truck and throw all of our recycling waste into the dump truck and then compress it, smashes the glass, contaminates the paper and the cardboard, destroys all those resources simply through the way that the recycled waste is collected. So all of that, those valuable, recyclable or reusable resources are destroyed and they go into the residual waste pile. So I can't overstate, and I know that Gaia and Zero Waste Europe have really promoted this. It is really important. It's the foundation of sustainable zero waste models. How you collect and source separate your waste is the most effective way to reduce your residual waste stream. And then once you've reduced your residual waste stream, there's no justification to build expensive, polluting, large-scale incinerators. It can be managed far more effectively through an MRBT or a small field, well-controlled management.
Thank you, Jane and Yanek, for your contribution to our symposium. Because we have limited time, it's supposed to finish at 5. Let's have a round of applause for both of them. Hope to meet both of you sometime soon. Okay, thank you. We have one last present. Question from Trish. True or false? Zero waste strategies creates more jobs than any other waste management approach. And I would like to have, like, how many jobs? Yeah? Compared to others. Very easy. Very easy. Bragg had also put it up. How many times more? Answer that.
200 times.
Yes. Very good. Not taking, yeah? Thank you to our rapporteurs who's been paying attention to the presentations. Thank you so much. Now I would like to hand over the mic to Ms. Miriam. Oh, Fry. For the closing remarks. Closing remarks is... Yeah. 5 minutes for you and me, 5 minutes for Gaia. Thank you.
Actually, the closing remarks are supposed to be delivered by Gaia Director Froland Gate or the Deputy Director Miriam Mayang. However, they nominated me as a community to speak first. I would like to close today's symposium by congratulating to Gaia and to be grateful and thank Gaia for in the past 20 years, they never give up on community, they never give up on anti-incinerator movement. This year marked the 20th anniversary of Gaia presence in Malaysia because in 2003, they were brought to the Waste Not Asia conference in Penang through Gaia meeting in Penang 2003, and 20 years later today, we are here to discuss about anti-incinerator movement. So, first remark I want to make about this symposium is, even though history go in a linear way in terms of time, but human consciousness and human behavior actually is going in a spiral direction and not linear. Therefore, any mistake that we make in the past, we have to make an effort to correct it. This is what we learned 20 years ago when Gaia presence in Malaysia. We don't have a municipal waste incinerator in a big scale. 20 years later, after so many incinerators have gone on in reality and also in the pipeline in policy, we have proven that what Gaia have advocated about the problems of incinerations is also proven to our reality. So this consciousness is so important that not going in a linear way. And now, at this moment, when European countries, United Nations countries and member states have learned the lesson that incineration, even though rebranded as WTE incineration, waste to energy incineration, still it is a main source of greenhouse gas emission, is a main source of carbon dioxide emission, is the main source of contributing to climate crisis. Therefore, we have to take an urgent, immediate action to phase out incineration, phase out waste to energy incineration all over the world, globally. And so with that, Malaysia as part of the member, and also Malaysian organizations part of the member of Gaia, we need to think for a national strategy as well as a regional strategy, especially for Southeast Asia and the Asia Pacific, to make a correction to the wrong they have done in the past, in terms of policies, in terms of legislations, and in terms of behavioral change. So I would like to focus on, to conclude my own conclusions of this symposium that I would like to take away from this symposium is that zero waste approach is people-oriented, is people-focused, is community-oriented. People is more important than high technology. Zero waste approach bring jobs to the people, to the community, empower the people and the community, as well as the people consciousness and behavioral change will make the world sustainable and will make the movement sustainable, but not high technology. Number two, the second point is that with having the United Nations resolutions on zero waste and the European Union Green Deal action plan to phase out incineration, yet global regional legislation is not enough. It has to be translated into different regional legislation and national legislations. Therefore, we call on the Malaysian government to have legislations that ensure zero waste is a reality in Malaysia, to be institutionalized and to be implemented. And we also call on the ASEAN countries to make the ASEAN regional entity as a zero waste entity. We go for this as a future waste direction. And also very importantly is about behavioral change. So I hope from this symposium what we take away is, in order for the change to happen, every one of us have a responsibility. Every one of us have to change our behavior, change our mindset, and embrace zero waste full-heartedly. And with that, I will pass the closing remark to Froilan. Great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mei. I'll make this very quick. To all the organizers, thank you so much. It's been a privilege for us to be here. Thank you for giving us a space to share. Even Mei mentioned that Gaia didn't give up on the community for the past 20 years. Gaia would never give up because Gaia is about community. Today, we've seen the power of the Gaia Network. We've heard speakers from several countries, from Europe and from Asian countries, Japan and China and Australia. And that is the power of the network. We know that sometimes it feels like the issue is too big for us, especially if you're a small community. But in Gaia, you have a global network that is willing and able to support you. Not only in finding false solutions, but most importantly, remember that it is a network with a very diverse wealth of solutions that we could learn from and implement. And even here locally, we have these models and examples. So please know that you are not alone, and hopefully today is a start of a broader conversation on how you can work together in Malaysia and how the global community could support and work with you. Thank you so much. Terima kasih banyak.
Okay, with that, we are going to end this symposium, and I would like all the volunteers and committee who have helped and stand up, and we want to thank them, the documenter, Adam, Nadia, our interpreter, Jerry, our zero waste exhibitor, Haram Makers, Eco and Sustainable Resources, Zero Waste Malaysia, and that art project, and our Marcus, the main person in the organizing secretariat in the local in Malaysia, and our international Gaia office from Europe and Asia Pacific for providing all the important resource persons, knowledge share, and the network to make today's event successful. And we want to thank the technical support provided by Sam Azrul, and also we have a legal advisor here to back up us if anything happens. Deva from Sam also. So we thank the 4 Gaia staff flew in from Manila. Trisha is the one who organized this symposium together with Marcus. And Fronen and Miriam, Brex, and also 3 speakers flew in from Indonesia. Kolis and Iwan. So with that, and also the National Alliance Anti-Incineration, Gabungan Anti-Incinerator Kebangsaan, Guide Namchoa, and also for the community impacted communities from Batu Arang, and from German, from Meru, from Kapar, who were present here before. Without every one of you, today we will not make today's symposium a successful one. Thank you very much for everyone's participation. Thank you.
Can you push me? Oh, hi.